And call the Board of Selectmen meeting together for July 27th, and the time is 6:33. And we'll take a roll call vote with myself. I'll start. Sean Farrell here. Darcy?
Darcy Dale here.
Rosie?
Rosie Kennedy here.
Jamie?
Jamie Knudsen here.
And Bill?
Glenn Wilson here.
And Jay, do you want to, I mean, we don't really have anybody to call our meeting to order for CPC. Do you want to just start with the preso, or do you want to call it to order?
I think the only member online now is Sherry Leonard, correct? So,
Yeah,
yeah,
I'm
she's on
here.
the phone, so we've got, well, there's three of us here, I guess.
I'm
So,
here as well.
You get Catherine Middlebusher here too.
all right. So Jay, if you want to call your CPC together.
okay, why don't we just start? I don't think I need to call a roll call.
Okay.
Um,
The agenda does have Pledge of Allegiance on it, so do you want to do that first?
Yeah, let's do that, and then we'll let Jay do the presentation. All right. I pledge allegiance
Allegiance to the flag
Of the
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one
nation,
nation,
under
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with liberty,
and justice for all.
All right. And so just to kick it off, we have Jay Butler, the chair of the CPC, with us tonight for a joint meeting. And as we've done the last, I think, maybe 2 years or so, we've had a joint meeting for the CPC's annual public hearing. And so we've got a screen share here, and here's our slide deck. And Jay, if you want to intro and kick it off, go right ahead.
just a comment, thanks to the Board of Selectmen for allowing us to share the spotlight this evening. And as you mentioned, this is an annual meeting required by statute for us to reach out to the community, explain what we've been up to, and actually to solicit ideas for grants going forward. And I will do that as we go through here. Pat Shannon, our coordinator, is running the slides. So if you go to the next slide, please. This is our committee coordinator, Pat Shannon. He just joined us beginning of this month. Thanks to Patrick Reffert for running the nationwide search. Go deep. I'm not kidding about the nationwide search. Meeting minutes, Mary Alice Cookson, she's on this call, keeping track of what we do. I'm the chair. I'm an at-large member. Robert Preston, at-large. Kim Deedle comes over to us from the Zoning Board of Appeals. She's not yet on the committee. She's only waiting a vote of the Board of Selectmen to be appointed. She's applied. We've talked to her. Again, thanks to Patrick for recruiting her. We have one opening on the committee, an at-large position. Catherine Middlebusher has been on the committee several years. I have her listed as the Historic District Commission rep, but she's not that officially. I hope that becomes official at their meeting tomorrow evening. Ed Howard, who recently retired, was the chair and their rep. I'm assuming with Catherine sitting on our committee already, they will no doubt appoint her as their rep. Chris Currier represents the Conservation Commission. Richard Boroff just joined us this month, again, via recruiting via Patrick Reffert. He's from the Planning Board and also the chair of the Open Space Committee. Sherry Leonard, who's on the line, is from the Housing Authority. And of course, we have Sean Farrell, who's been a member of our committee for several years. Recently leaving the committee was Janelle Curry, who moved out of town, Ed Howard, who retired, and Neil Duggan, who went on to a much more political committee, the Board of Directors of the Little League. So next slide, please. Just a quick history. The CPC was signed into law in September 2000. We finally adopted it in 2005. Peter and Gretel Clark did all the heavy lifting to make that happen. Took 2 tries, but we finally joined in May 2005. Right now, there's 177 out of the 351 mass communities that belong. 68 of them have a 3% surcharge, which is the maximum you could do. The trust fund, the CPA trust fund, where the money comes from, is managed by the Department of Revenue. They set the state match each year and the 2 additional 3% surcharge distributions. These are fixed amount dollars that change every year, that communities that sign up for the 3% get that additional money. I'll show you how much that is in a minute. And finally, the trust funds get their revenues from the Registry of Deeds property transactions. And since 2012, any year-end surplus voted by the legislature. This has happened 5 times since 2012. Most recently last year, when Senator Bruce Tarr supported the legislation to add 20 million to the coffers. And Brad Hills heavily supported that as well. Last year, Governor Baker signed into law the first increase in document transaction fees in 20 years, where they went into effect last December, and they bumped the cost of municipal liens from $10 to $25, and for most other documents from $25 to $50. With this happening, many people, myself included, thought that the state match might jump into the 30 to 40% range because it had been declining in recent years. Next. State match for this year was 23.9%. The state match for this year was not made until May of this year versus the normal February that we hear about it. And at the time, it was estimated 11.2% based on the registry fees collected up until April. But at mid-year this year, the Registry of Deeds revenues were up double from last year already. And so the prognosis for a much better state match is there. It's just that the DOR hasn't given us another forecast yet. So the official forecast is still only 11.2%, but it has to be higher. Next. So our trust fund distribution for last year with the 23.9 state match was $454,000 for the surcharge. The state match contributed another $108,000 or so for a total revenue of $562,000. And this just one other note. Normally we would get this distribution in November of the year. That came in 2 parts this year. In December and January is a day for some reason couldn't close their books in time. So everything is delayed. This is a pie chart that put together to show the difference between the local surcharge and the state match. And yeah, the local surcharge contributes the bulk of the dollars. Hopefully that gets better. And here's a bar chart showing the same thing. You can see in FY12, it got a little uptick there when they started adding state surplus monies. Now it's coming down again as we move to this year, but hopefully that increase in registry fees will increase that state match even more. Thanks. Wenham, my next door neighbor, just to show you the difference, is they got $385,000 and $94,000 in the state match. And then because they are set up with a 3% surcharge, they get the extra money in the round 2 and 3 distributions in fixed amounts, 60 grand from round 2 and 38,000 from round 3. So their total revenue is about 579,000. The difference between what we got and what them is about 17,000. Not a lot of money. Next. Just to show you what some of our nearest neighbors are doing. There are many that have not adopted the CPA yet. You can see what they are. Beverly signed up 3 years ago at 1%. Our nearest neighbor, Essex, is at 1.5%. We're at 2% with Newburyport. And 3%, we have several: Oxford, Georgetown, North Andover, Rockport, Rowley, Wenham, West Newbury. Next, I'll blow through this. The round 2 and 3 distributions that I mentioned this last year. The DOR came up with some very complicated calculation called equalized property valuation. And they divided all the 351 communities in Mass and put them into 10 different deciles. And the communities that come out with the lowest EPV, if you will, are placed in the top deciles and get more money, where the more affluent ones with higher EPVs receive less. Hamilton's in the 7th decile out of 10, and Wenham is in the 4th. Okay, just to show you what they can, who else is in the seventh decile with us. In other words, the revenue has equivocated Hamilton to all these communities in terms of their relative affluence. Just so we compare things between communities every once in a while. It's pretty surprising, some of these, but that's what it is. Next. Wenham's in the fourth decile, and these are the communities they're compared with. We wonder why there's not 35 communities here, is because these are the only communities in the fourth decile who've adopted the CPA. The rest of them haven't adopted it, and I wasn't able to dig out those names to find out who they were. But, yeah, somebody could do that if they wanted.
Mm.
The question that I bring up every year is, what if we did 3%? So I did the calc. I did both things. I come up with the estimated surcharge revenue from last year, be 681 versus 454. We get a state match of 23.9. We get the round 2 and round 3 distributions for our decile rank, and we come up with a revenue of 901 grand, which is a $339,000 increase over the 2%. So it's a big number. The jump from 2% to 3%, the revenue jumps up pretty quick. Next.
Jay, do you recall, I mean, maybe it's here, the increase, oh, there it is. I rescind my questions. It's this slide. Go ahead.
How much does it cost?
Yeah, exactly.
The assessed property evaluation in column 1, the property tax at $16.98 per thousand, and then what is the cost of the surcharge, and then what is the proposed cost of the 3% surcharge, and what's the difference? So if you look at the $500,000 evaluation, the 2% surcharge requires $136 a year. If you were to bump it to 3% surcharge, that homeowner would pay $204 a year, or $68 more. Now, since this surcharge is billed quarterly with the property tax bills, it comes out to be $17 a quarter, or $6 a month, or something like, for a $500,000 property. So it's not a large hit to the homeowners. It may be to some, but I don't think it's such a large hit, because the benefit of the 300,000+ more dollars looks pretty good to me. I show you the calculation below. We have 2 exemptions to the CPA in our town. One is that the first $100,000 valuation is exempt. Hence, we subtract that before we calculate the surcharge.
And just for information purposes, most of our houses, I think, we average about $550,000 is our median house, or our average house price, I think, right?
That's the right one. There is another exemption, and this is a full exemption. You don't pay anything, and that is property owned by a low-income person, non-senior, or property owned by a senior. It's guideline. You don't pay the CPC surcharge at all. Applicant,
Oh,
it must be, you have to meet the guidelines to get it. The person you approach.
I'm having trouble hearing.
Jay. Yeah, we can't hear you, Jay.
Somebody has a lot of noise from the. I keep going.
Better.
Mary Beth Lawton and Tim Morris at the Senior Center also help out seniors with these applications if they need it. Next, the grants approved this past year, 2019. We gave 2 grants to the Hamilton Town Hall renovation, addition, and preservation project. You notice the new title. We've had a lot of people talk about, are we preserving it? Are we putting an addition on? Are we doing a renovation? So we've coined a new title for the project of renovation, addition, and preservation.
So it's not the DTHBC, now it's the HTHRAPP.
We haven't got there yet.
We'll have to think of a good anagram for it.
Affordable Housing Trust got 200 grand. We're there, to date, we've been pretty much their sole supplier of funds. That will change. That is changing this year, according to Patrick Refford. I guess they're getting some money from the Canterbrook development. So, but again, we'll be there to support them. We were there when they were first started, and we'll still be there. One other note that's come up earlier this year, and I've talked to both Joe and Sean about this, is that there's a program clarification that rental assistance is available through CPC, community housing. And this was an amendment that was put in place in 2012, but who knew? It never came up before. And only when communities like Chelsea started jumping in with both feet with their CPC monies did we realize that this happened. So I reached out at the time to Russ Tanzer, the Affordable Housing Trust, and discussed it with him, as they're the typical group that would handle it. I also traded emails with Heather Ford, chair of the Hamilton Foundation. Made her aware of this as well, but I've had no feedback from anyone to know whether anybody in town is looking for rental assistance, but it is available through the CPC. It's quite a complicated process to set it up, but there's a lot of support available through the Community Preservation Coalition Office and KP Law, our town council too.
So Jay, I just have a quick question about that rental assistance. Is that something that's capped? Is there a particular amount, and where does that money come from? Does it come from our funds, or does it come from the state
This
for the rental assistance? Yeah.
This would be from the CPC. It would be from our CPC revenue.
Okay. And do you have particular amount of money delegated for that?
We have no money delegated to that. It's if the town, if we wanted to set up a program to offer rental assistance, an organization such as the Affordable Housing Trust would have to set it up. It needs applications. It needs a means of vetting the income of the applicants. It needs a cap on the money. What we would do is, if the AHT wanted to do that, they would apply to us for a grant of X number of dollars. We would debate that, hopefully approve it. Town meeting would have to approve it, and then whatever money was approved will be then available for rental assistance.
Okay. So it would be put in the category of affordable housing trust?
It comes
Okay.
to affordable housing.
Okay. Because we had,
Go ahead, Rosie.
I was going to say, we had batted that idea around as thinking about how last year and just up until recently, how we could provide sort of alternative methods of providing housing for people. And so I don't know if this would absolutely fall in that category, but it's an interesting revelation, and I will talk with Marnie Crouch about that. So
Yeah, and it comes out of I'll call it the bucket, right? The CPC has different buckets, so it would come out of the affordable housing bucket.
Yeah.
And I think some communities, besides, I think Jay mentioned Chelsea, but other communities have used it recently with COVID stuff for emergency rental relief. And I think that has gone through just their CPCs instead of through their housing trust on a more kind of a regular basis. So it's kind of whichever way the community wants to handle it.
okay.
Okay, I have a question too. Is it restricted just to rental assistance, or could it also apply for maybe a short time period where someone who had a mortgage could require assistance too?
No, rental.
Okay. Rental only.
Okay.
We'd look into that.
Good question, Darcy. Thanks, Jay.
We'll move to the next slide. Bonding. The CPC is eligible to have bonds. Currently, we have one for Sagamore Hill. The John J. Donovan Recreation Area, whichever you want to call it. And for recently, the town meeting approved the latest bond repayment, 110.6K. This decreases until retirement of the bond at 2032. This activity arose from a 2015 grant where we opened up a $1.25 million bond for 15 years, plus 500 grand in cash. The last Donovan Field or Donovan Park bond repayment was last year of $41,200. This arose from a 2010 grant where we had a 500K bond for 10 years plus 340K in cash. This idea of bonding, a couple of things. The bonding money can only come from the local surcharge dollars, cannot come from the state match. And if for some reason, and I hope not, the town meeting were to vote the CPC out of existence because they didn't like it, the town would have to assume responsibility for this bond. So you better keep us around for a while. So when this latest Sagamore Hill at 110, at 110,000, that leaves 343,000 available for new bonds. But I will tell you that there's a proposed town hall renovation project, $2 million grant that we expect to entertain next month. We entertained it end of last year, beginning of this year, but we agreed to table it until the town was ready to ask for the full dollar amount for the final construction dollars. But I'm told that we will move forward with it. This $2 million grant is estimated to be a 5% 30-year municipal bond at about 167,000. And if this were approved at town meeting, the available bond repayment funds would be at 176,483. So if this goes through, we're limited to maybe another large $2 million bond. And unless the surcharge was raised, or all of a sudden the collections went way up, it's not going to change very much. So that's one thing we need to keep our eye on as we look at bonding things. Okay. The current state of CPC reserves. This is according to Marissa Batista. Open space and recreation, we have $61.52. Community housing, a little higher. Historical preservation, unreserved, 549. So total reserves in our accounts as of August 1st would be 641,000. Now, what happens when, two things you need to recall. If somebody applies for a grant, it has to fit in one of these three categories: open space or recreation, community housing, or historical preservation. And if we approve the grant and it goes to town meeting and is then approved, the money comes from the reserves for that account. But if we end up approving a grant in excess of what's in the reserves, we then dip into the unreserved account so we can fund whatever is asked for. The other thing about this division of reserves, if you will, is that each year we are required to look at our entire revenue and put 10% of those revenues into each one of these three specific reserves in order to build them up, unless you're giving a grant in that year or you're paying a bond payment. That's why open space and rec is so low. With the Sagamore Hill bond payment, it easily exceeded the 10%, roughly 60 grand that we would normally put in there. That's why it doesn't show any money. We didn't have to put any money in there this year. We also have an expense account that's not shown to pay for membership in the Community Preservation Coalition office in Boston, which is an organization to which all the communities who adopt CPA belong. They keep track of all the town's activities, give us information, make determination on eligibility, things like that. We also pay Pat Shannon's salary and our secretary and some signage and some other expenses as well. Next slide. This is a pictorial view. Thank you, Pat, for showing just where the bulk of the money is. Typically, it's in the unreserved account. That's fine. Again, as long as we play the game and use up the money in the dedicated account, we can then go to the unreserved, and that's completely allowed. Next, another way of showing it to show open space and rec clearly is the biggest thing. The Patton Park pool is in there. The Donovan Park is in there. And the Sagamore Hill is in there. Hence, that's why it's such a big number. Next slide. Who gets all this money? This is a listing of organizations in town ranked by dollars. And it shows how many dollars they've received to date and how many different grants. And you can see the rec department is at the top, and that's primarily because of the Patton Park pool, but some smaller things as well. Essex County Greenbelt is Sagamore Hill. The Affordable Housing Trusts, we give them money almost every town meeting, so that's why they're so high. Department of Public Works, we pick up a lot of odd things in the cemetery, restoration of the cannons, some work in the past on Town Hall, etc. Housing Authority, we paid for the refurbishment of several buildings over there that have needed it. Community House helped them along. The American Legion goes all the way down to the Boy Scout Troop 35. So while this isn't a complete list of every organization that could get money, it's most of them. And so this is just giving you an idea of if it's a viable organization, it doesn't need to be governmental. It just has to have a fit with the eligibility, a responsibility, a belief that if we give them money that they will use it properly as for what they asked for. Just in case you're wondering. I have other charts that I didn't show here that list the locations of all this money, but I thought we'd just show this one to give you an idea. Next. We have a forward-looking radar, if you will, and that's the one of the reasons for this meeting, this presentation. We need to know as best you can, what do you see on the horizon for grants we might be asked for? Because as we use our money, especially for bonding, if we somehow approve it and Town Hall votes it, and then all of a sudden 3 years down the line, we say, God, we should have waited for this one. This is the chart. This is our chart that we try to keep those things ahead of us. We carry this on our webpage. So we have 3 categories. Category A is eligible. It has a pretty detailed cost estimate and has pretty strong support. Right now, the only one in the A is the Town of Hamilton $2 million grant. And as I told you, we'll proceed with that this fall. Next. The next category is category B. There's some question about eligibility that needs to be looked at. The cost is kind of a guesstimate, and the project needs a little more definition. Turf field at the high school has been before us many years ago. It's coming back. I mean, if you realize that the school department recently put in a $65,000 ask that was approved at town meeting to redo the analyses and the cost estimates that were done several years ago for a turf field at the high school. And the CPC actually paid for that estimate to the community housing. We certainly expect another ask from the Affordable Housing Trust. And the American Legion, we've carried that for several years, but there's been no activity. But this is the category B projects that we see. Next. Category C is a little more murky. There's no real definition. The costs are unclear, and the project support's in question. The first 2 we've carried for many years in deference to Ed Howard, who argues all by himself every year for them, is the feasibility study to do something with Tobacco Lake Beach And go back to sledding on Donovan Hill. There's been no other person or organization who fought for these, but we thought in deference to Ed, we'd keep them on there another year or so and see what happened. And finally, the Council on Aging has asked several years ago, there's no activity, to do an elevator and a fire escape to make access to the second floor of the senior center viable. That obviously needs further discussion. Next. The anticipating, looking at the fall, I mentioned the Town Hall Building Committee grant. I also was given a verbal heads up that the Congregational Church might approach us for a grant to rebuild their steeple. Have no details, no money, no contact, just somebody told me. So I put it on here just to remind me. We have given money to the Congregational Church many moons ago to replace the bell, I think, or the clock at the top.
I think it's clock.
And it isn't within the historic district, so it would be eligible. We'll see. Next. A quick lesson in what we can do with the money. Across the top, you see open space, historic preservation, recreation, and housing, community housing. Down the left column, you see acquire, create, preserve, support, or rehabilitate, or restore. And you see yes, no. Open space, we can do pretty much with open space, except we can't do support. And I'm not sure what support activities one could think of, but you can't really do support. And you can't really rehabilitate or restore it unless you originally created it or bought it with CPA funds. So we can't restore a property that's been open space to take down trees and stuff like that. You can't do that. Historic, you can't really create historic, so you're not going to create any models or anything like that. You can't do support, like take pictures of historic and preserve the pictures. Recreation, you can acquire, create, preserve, rehabilitate. Interesting note about the rehabilitation of recreation parks. We've done that obviously with
Playground.
Patton Park, Winthrop, Euchre School, Pingree Park, is that when this, for years you couldn't do that, but most of the big cities who had existing playgrounds that needed serious help, you couldn't rehabilitate them, and yet they had no room to build new ones. Finally, they decided to change the rule, and they changed the rule to allow rehabilitation of existing playgrounds. And finally, housing, pretty much do whatever you want with preserve and support. Can't do maintenance. You can't do general maintenance, and unless it was originally acquired or created. So that's in a nutshell, but I will tell you that each one of these yeses and nos has about 10 lines of qualification beneath it. And so we need to go out to the Community Preservation Coalition and or KP Law when some of these questions come up, because eligibility is sometimes fuzzy. This is our timeline. This is our calendar for the year of our meetings. And you point out a couple of things. We have a two-part application process. The first process is you've got to fill out an application to eligibility to let us talk to you about the project. What are you doing? Where's the money coming from? What's the scope? And let us research eligibility with the coalition or with KP Law. And so that's a separate meeting to determine eligibility of the project. The second step is to submit the funding request. And this may be as a result of questions like we say, what else are you going to get? Are you going to do any fundraising? Is there another donor? Et cetera, questions like that. So there's two different decisions to be made on all projects, both eligibility and funding. And you can see our deadlines. The first one coming up pretty soon is August 6th for eligibility. We're going to wait eligibility for the town hall rehabilitation project because we voted about several times to rule that eligible. So but anybody else who wants to come in and expect to the have their grant considered at town meeting, you really got to need our guidelines, because once we get through our deliberations and hopefully vote on something, it then goes and it's looked at very carefully by the Board of Selectmen, especially the FinCom, and then we're called in, usually me, to answer a lot of questions on it. What are you doing, et cetera, et cetera. So, and then you got to make sure you got all the deliberations done before the warrant needs to be printed for town meeting. So hence, we back up several months from town meeting.
Mm.
Next. And this is just the rest of the year.
Mhm.
I guess when town meeting would be next week.
Yeah.
Last slide. Again, the reason for this presentation, this meeting, is to solicit your ideas for CPC grant requests, even if it's not well defined. If it's something we're overlooking, that's a big ticket item that's going to pop up downstream, we'd like to know about it, understand it, so that we don't spend all the money we have under our recommend spending all our money. We get good ideas and good projects, but there's always one that's better than all the others. So our meetings are at 7 p.m. on the second Thursday of every month. They're certainly open to the public. And by design, once on any agenda item, once the committee is talked and make sure all the committee contributes, anybody who shows up can stand up and get adequate time to talk as long as they want, pro or con for anything on our agenda. So it's a very friendly committee in terms of hearing out the public, and we've had a couple of long meetings because of that. Before I sign off, just are there any other questions from any fellow CPC members or for the Board of Selectmen or from the public?
I have two questions. If somebody had a question who wanted to go before me, I can certainly wait. Okay. So if there's nobody else, then my first question for you, Jay, thank you for that presentation. That was very, very succinct and well organized. My first question is there a sunset clause on funds that are allocated?
Yeah, that's usually written into the warrant. We used to use a sunset clause, and then we were told by then town council we shouldn't be using a sunset clause, but we should be using a clause that requires when the work starts, not
Okay.
spend all the money. So on every grant that we approve, there is a clause that says you must start this project within typically 1 or 2 years is what we do.
Okay. And then my other, I'm sorry.
All right, but if I can add to that, Rosie, sorry to interrupt, that we, in fact, every year we review our kind of books at the CPC meeting, and just our last meeting, we went through all of our open grants, and we kind of determine what money's left over, if there is, or if someone's not going to use the grant, and we close out any grants. So it's not like things just stay open. For a while, we had a few that were open. I think the one for the fire truck, I think at the public safety building, stayed open for about 10 years probably, and then we finally closed it.
Yeah, that's a long time.
We expect, as Sean suggests, we look and review every open grant at every meeting, just even if it's only a one sentence that everything's on track, everything's fine, the project's alive, that's it. We don't want to get into this, what Sean mentioned of having something languish for 10 years and never start.
We can't use the money. So then my other question, I know there's been a lot of interest from the CPC and certainly from others to increase our percentage to 3%. The other side of that coin and is that there's also been a lot of talk about the fact that CPC grants have perhaps gone astray from their original purposes. And so my question is, are there any plans within the state to put additional parameters on eligibility? for example, I know that pools for a while, and that's no reflection on the Hamilton pool, just in general, that many communities were using CPC money for pools. And in the recent past, the CPC has decided that pools are not an appropriate use of fundings for whatever reason. So, and I am aware that a lot of people, I have heard a lot of people complain about CPC funds used for things that perhaps it wasn't intended for. So if we want to increase the surcharge to 3%, how do we protect against using those funds for things that perhaps CPC funds were not meant for?
Well, I guess my first question is, I've never heard that statement made before, that the CP funds were spent where they weren't meant to be. No one or me.
I'm not that they weren't meant to be, but perhaps they were stretching the eligibility.
So if it is, I would really like to know to
Yeah.
do that. But we tend to go out. When Dora Fox was here, he and I used to go out and visit the sites during the context of the grant to make sure that they were doing things the way we wanted.
I don't think it was meant specifically for Hamilton, but just that the CPC in general, their regulations. Maybe that's the issue, that it was being stretched
Pretty tight.
to the point where a lot of money was being spent on things that it was not originally intended for. So
I will say to that, Rosie, that if the CPC committee has even an inkling of a question, we usually call Stuart Saginaw at the CPC at the state level and talk to him and their council about it. And we've done that many times, right, Jay? I mean, we have them on speed dial sometimes for different things. One instance is we were looking at some grants for some of the affordable housing in town, fixing some porches and doing some painting and stuff like that. And we really wanted to have it be eligible, but it turned out it wasn't eligible because it was a maintenance thing and not it just didn't fit within the parameters. So we do call to kind of double check a lot.
Okay, good.
This past year for the town hall building project, we had the executive director of the coalition office come to our meeting.
Right.
I think you were there.
Yeah,
And then after that meeting, we even went to KP Law to get their interpretation of the law to make sure we were doing the right thing.
Yeah, and that would be my third comment. Can the town hall building committee ask for more money?
Say it again.
She wanted to know if the town hall building committee could ask for more money.
They could.
I will encourage that.
Yeah, I will add that if you've ever come to a CPC meeting during one of our grant eligibility or funding meetings, we really do grill the applicants. I always kind of say when the applicants leave, you did great. We just do this to everybody because I think it kind of intimidates some people how we kind of really get into the details and the eligibility and stuff. So we are very thorough.
Good. And as you should, right? Because this is taxpayer money, the grant, the matching grants. Absolutely. That's a great answer to my question. Thank you.
Right. And plus, and the ultimate kind of yes or no. I mean, the CPC can deem it eligible and deem the funding parameters the way we like them, but it's ultimately town meeting decision. So, it's ultimately the voters and what they think the project is worth it or not worth it.
Right.
I just had a comment too. Jay, your knowledge and your background on this topic is incredible. So thank you for helping guide us through this because it does get challenging and you seem to have done a great job improving the community in a positive way. I had two questions or comments. One is, I thought a few years ago, there was some discussion about maybe you guys were going to put plaques up at some of the projects you guys had funded. Did that go forward? Have you guys been doing that? Or is that something that am I thinking of a different thing?
We have plaques at the Legion. We have plaques at the Senior Center, at the Community House, at Donovan Park. There will be one at the pool. There's one at the Donovan Recreation Area. So yes,
I think
we,
that's great. That's great. I think it's important to recognize that because it's important to know community know what they're spending their monies on. The second thing is I'm definitely interested in this 2 to 3% thing, especially the town hall renovation project coming up. So what would be, I'm not sure if I'm in favor or not in favor right now, but it's interesting to talk about what would be the next steps to get it onto a town warrant, and how long would that take to sort of, I mean, I guess I'm asking you, but maybe someone else can answer that, but what would be the steps to,
It'd be a citizen's petition.
it
Since
would be, okay.
CPC started with a citizen's petition, it would be a citizen's petition. I mean, another board or something could also sponsor it, but ultimately it would be a citizen's petition to get it on the warrant.
and that's because, as Sean intimated, the original vote by the town was by citizens' position at the ballot box. And that's the only way you can change it up or down, is by going to the ballot box. And it's a simple majority. No, you don't have to have 2/3 or anything like that.
Mm.
So it's doable.
Yeah.
We've discussed it off and on in our committee for years. And the last time we really talked about it in any length of time, we decided that we weren't the committee to mount that petition and to run with it. It really needed to be a group of concerned citizens or an organization that wanted to bring that forward.
Yeah, we kind of felt that, even though I would say unanimously the board felt that it would be good for us to go to 3%, we didn't want to push it without citizen support. So
Is there any indication that a citizen or group would be bringing it forward?
we've had some people say they were interested, but I think the traction just the ball never got rolling with it. Plus, with all the current events, it's kind of fallen on the wayside a little bit.
Right, that, yeah, right.
Jay, I'll just add a couple of things, and then if anybody else has anything in there where we can close it out. But the capital committee came and I believe they talked to you a year or so ago. And did they have any input on projects for us or things that we might be able to help with? Besides, I know town hall was one of them.
No.
And then the second thing, just before I forget, just a CPC matter, I talked to the Wenham CPC, and they're interested in still having a joint meeting because they're going to have a special fall town meeting in Wenham.
Oh, great.
But they don't have anything tentatively planned. And we could reschedule the KP Law kind of seminar. And then they would like to meet in person if possible, farther down the road, probably towards special. But, I think it's probably going to be a Zoom like we're on now. So just to keep you in the loop on that.
I put those two ideas on our August 13th agenda, and I was hoping you were going to speak to them then.
Yeah, I can do it again then. Anybody else have anything to add for CPC or ask? All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jay. That was a great presentation.
Thanks, Jay.
Thanks for all your time and effort.
Good job.
All right. So,
Sign off.
all right. So now we've got, let me look at my agenda here. Public comment, 3 minutes of topics not already on the agenda. If there's anybody that wants to add any comments before we get started, they're more than welcome to. Okay, I'll guess that's a no. And then Selectmen Town Manager reports. We'll go kind of around, and I'll start with Darcy, if you have anything to add.
Yes, I made contact with my liaisons. I'm the liaison for the Board of Health, so I've contacted David Smith, and I'll be joining them on August 6th for a Zoom meeting. And I've also made contact with Mike for the Town Hall Building Committee and Jack Lawrence. So I'll be sitting with them in a few days. And let's see if there's anything else. I think that's about it.
Okay, thanks, Darcy. Bill, do you have anything to add? You're on mute, Bill.
Sorry about that, Sean.
All right.
Yes, I know we're going to be hearing from Mary Beth in a little bit on the as a superintendent, but just for giving a quick update on the school committees and some dates and what they're doing in the background. They're obviously working very hard to come up with a plan for the school year, weighing, teachers, faculty, staff, students, parents, issues. The dates they have coming up right now is they have a meeting on 7/12 29 for which is next Wednesday for preliminary, or this Wednesday for a preliminary plan. And next week they have they're required to do sort of an environmental study on the HVAC systems and conditions within the schools. That's happening next week. And then we currently on the schedule, it shows an 8/12 and August 12th meeting, but I believe they're going to try and change it to August 10th. I think most school districts in the state are trying to make a decision by August 10th. So if you look around what our neighbors are doing, neighbor communities, no one's really going to make a decision on what they're doing until August 10th is what I've seen. So, but we'll hear more from specifics from Mary Beth. I just wanted to give dates so people can make sure they get those dates on their calendars if they want to attend those meetings. That's all I have.
Thanks, Bill. Jamie, do you have anything to add?
Nothing other than I'm getting my bearings under me, and we'll be attending some of the other meetings that I'm responsible for, and reaching out to liaisons. So I'm getting there.
Perfect. Thanks, Jamie. And Rosie.
Just a couple of little things. I with Darcy will be attending the Town Hall Building Committee on Thursday, and I'm very much looking forward to that. You're going to hear lots of advocacy for the Town Hall renovation. I'm very excited about that possibility. And then the other thing is I have
Addition, renovation, and what is it? Addition, renovation.
Great.
preservation, right,
And
right,
preservation.
exactly. Right, exactly. And I've touched bases with the Concom to let them know that I will be on board for another year, and that I look forward to working with them on projects. I'm very happy about that. I have not had the opportunity to reach out yet to the Housing Authority, but I'm very excited about doing that and looking around to see what sort of projects we can do for the following year. So that's it for tonight.
Great. Thank you, Rosie. I don't have anything really to add at the moment. My updates will come a little bit later in the agenda, but Joe sent out his town manager report. I haven't had the chance to read it yet, but he can add some highlights. Joe.
Actually, I'm going to, and out of deference to, we have several visitors tonight. I did send out the town manager report a little earlier tonight. We'll have it posted online tomorrow morning. Nothing, burning that has to be discussed right now. Definitely get it up online and make sure that Facebook has a link to it for everybody. But I want to help you guys move things along. So
Sounds good.
hot night for everybody. So
Thanks, everybody. All right. So now we have, if I'm looking at my agenda here, a few announcements for board and committee openings. We have a opening for the Council on Aging, opening for the Hamilton Historic District Commission, Community Preservation Committee opening, Hamilton Affordable Housing Trust opening, and a Hamilton Board of Appeals opening. And then we have on our consent agenda, approve some minutes, approve the minutes from May 26, 2020 and June 17th, 2020. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Anybody second? Okay, seconded, and we'll take a roll call vote. We'll start with Darcy.
Darcy Dale, aye.
Bill.
William Olson, aye.
Jamie.
Jamie Knutson, aye.
Rosie.
Rosie Kennedy, aye.
And myself, Sean Farrell, aye. Thank you, everyone. And now
those are some challenging minutes to do. So I think I thought she did a great job of
Yes.
capturing everybody's emotion on those things without any emotion. So thank you for that.
All right, now moving on to our agenda, the meat and potatoes of tonight here. So we've got an update on the reopening of Hamilton Wenham schools, and we have a presentation by our brand new superintendent, new to us anyway, Mary Beth. And is it Banios? Oh, you're on mute, Mary Beth. Sorry.
Banios was the last name.
I
Yeah.
apologize. Thank you. So welcome and introduce yourself to everybody, and we can go ahead and get started. Very, very glad to have you with us tonight.
Well, it's great to be here, and I thank you for making time for this presentation tonight at your meeting. As you know, there's a few things going on at the school department, and I think it'll be really helpful for us to stay in close contact so that you're aware of what's happening on our end, and we can think about ways that we may be able to collaborate and partner together. Joe, is it possible for me to share my screen, or did I sent you the slides as well?
You
Either
should be
way,
able to help you out.
Up them out. Let me see if we can get that to work.
I didn't get them, but let me see if I can make you now that Pat is no longer a co-host, because he left, let me see if I can make you a co-host.
Yeah, I
Oh.
think maybe, there we go.
You got him? Okay.
I do. I'm going to try using the present, but there's been a couple challenges. We'll see if we hit many glitches here. So again, my intent today is to give you a brief overview of what we're finding, and then answer any questions that you might have. Right now, one of the things that we're thinking a lot about are what are our key messages as we kind of frame this work. So one of the messages that we're looking at right now is just the reality that is uncertainty is a given. We know that families would want nothing more than to have a clear laid out plan for the fall, and we would want nothing more than to give that to them. And yet the reality is that we're unable to do that right now. Answers are evolving, and we know that answers may evolve and then they may change. So we're living in a very, very fluid environment. We also know that learning is not going to look the same way that it has in the past. And with this, we have some opportunities, and we'll also experience some losses. And finally, our goal is to work together with flexibility, collaboration, and in these challenging times when it gets really frustrating, to be mindful of when we're getting frustrated and wanting to blame somebody that might have a different perspective, and to really work to recognize one another's positive intent. Okay, let's see if this is going to behave. There we go. Next piece is that what I'm going to share with you this evening is this is our current thinking. You could wake up tomorrow morning and it could change. As you know, this afternoon we just got new information, and that the number of school days for students has changed, and that's from since I drove home from work and sat down here at the computer. So again, rapidly changing environment. Next, I wanted to give you a sense of all the pieces that are at play right now in terms of what's informing our decision. You know, we're looking at safety issues, equity issues, how we deliver our literacy curriculum, how we deliver our math curriculum, lots of concern about the social emotional well-being of students and support for positive relationships, instructional planning and preparation necessary for the execution of the plan, special education programming. We also have operational factors that we have to keep in mind. What does school look like? What is our ability for infection and mitigation control? What are the staffing issues that we are likely to face this fall when we look at the potential of people needing to be quarantined or staff asking for leave? What are the transportation logistics and costs? What are the lunch programs logistics and costs? What about technology? How do we manage substitutes? And then we have community factors that are also informing our recommendation. We've done a survey of parents that topped out around 700 participants. We had teacher feedback with large numbers of teachers responding there. We've been in communication with other regional school districts to understand what's happening in our region. We're in contact with the Board of Health, and we're also trying to figure out where our financial resources are so that we know what we have to deal with as we try to navigate the situation. Just quickly for your information, in our parents survey, you'll see that the majority of parents were looking for us to return fully in person. But if you combine hybrid and remote, we also have a fairly large percentage of the community that it would prefer to see us in a hybrid situation or a remote learning situation. If you look at the percentage, the remote learning piece is about 20%. Contrast to that, we see results from our teacher survey. And what we see in our teacher survey is a lot of worry around whether or not it's safe to come back into the classroom with 22 students, 3-foot social distancing. And that our teaching staff is actually feeling that the remote option is a better model. So this is the model that we've put out in the superintendent's chat last week. This is what the draft model is at this point. We are working to get more details around it. But what we know is that we will need to serve some of our students full-time in-person learning. Those will be our most vulnerable students, students with disabilities, students that are economically disadvantaged, English language students. They will need a program that will be in person pretty much full time. On the other end, we know that there are going to be families in situations in which we must provide a full remote program to some of our families as well. And we are anticipating that the majority of our students will be taking part in a hybrid learning environment. That means that they will be spending some of their time in person in schools and some of their time working remotely. And part of the reason for that is if we shift to this hybrid for the majority of our students, that enables us to move to 6-foot social distancing and to create learning spaces that are more viable for learning. Where are we on our timeline? This week, we had our first day of teacher design teams today. We have about 25 educators and about 5 administrators working together to try to build plans that make sense. We have an initial plan due, as was mentioned earlier in the meeting, on July 31st. Our school committee will be reviewing that on Wednesday. We have a district leadership team meeting where we will be having our nurse leader in, all of our district leaders, our union representation, school committee members, working together to build out to finalize a plan that makes sense for our community. It is anticipated that the school committee will actually vote on the plan on August 10th, and the final plan is actually due on August 10th. So we are operating as all districts are in a remarkably short time frame. This gives you a sense about, today we're experiencing what it's like to learn in an environment. We're socially distanced. We had our teachers and our administrators spread out across the high school library. We all spent the day in masks. And so in working and thinking about what are the adaptive problems we need to find solutions for, what are the technical problems we need to find solutions for, and really trying to come together and think things through in a thoughtful way. I wanted to make the board aware, as we think about some of the financial pieces related to that. To date, and I am anticipating this list is going to grow, we have had PPE expenses, we have had to purchase desks so that we can socially distance students, we have had to purchase technology. We just got transportation guidance, which is suggesting that that will most likely be more expensive. We are needing to invest in tents so that we have some outdoor learning spaces. And was mentioned earlier, we need to do a full study of our ventilation. And then looking at whatever suggestions come out of that. Just so you get a sense, this was DESE guidance that was released on Friday of last week. And basically they are giving us guidance that buses will run at approximately 32% capacity in order to ensure social distancing for students on the bus. If we can only fit approximately 1/3 of students on a bus than we have been able to in the past, that means that we need to do some thinking about how that's going to work, and potentially this could be an expensive item. And then finally, just again to give you a sense of some of the costs that come up with this, we are looking to have tents in all of our campuses so that we can move students outside and give them an opportunity for mask breaks, that type of thing. And you get a sense of what it costs to get a tent set up basically through September through mid-November. So these are some of the things that we are facing right now. Certainly a complex problem. Lots of good people though working together to try to figure this out. And so we want to make you aware that we are facing very specific COVID related costs. We are finding our way through putting together a formal plan for the fall, and that is evolving. But we should have a documented plan soon. And then there's a lot of questions that will need to be processed with our families in order to ensure that folks are feeling comfortable as we start the school year. So that's the Reader's Digest version of where we are, and I would be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Mary Beth?
I have just one question about, I have heard varying reports about the federal government picking up some of the costs for the PPE and ancillary expenses related to reopening the schools. Have you any information about that?
Yeah, we've received a small CARES grant for about 70,000. And so that has been the extent to date. Now, as we know, there are conversations happening at the federal level right now in terms of additional stimulus. So we are certainly keeping our eye on that and are hopeful to see more funds to help us work through this crisis.
Thank you.
I had three questions for him. I'm trying to keep them high level because I'm sure Wednesday will be a much longer meeting. But have you looked into a program to make sure every student in Hamilton Wenham has a laptop? What is that part of what you guys are doing? I know you talked about iPads, but are you doing something to make sure that every student has a laptop at home?
Yeah, so what we've done in terms of the technology is that at the high school, we have been one-to-one for a while. We are now making purchases that will enable us to be one-to-one at the middle level. And at the elementary level, at this point, in terms of looking at our funds, we do not feel that it is the best use of our funds at this time to purchase technology for all of our students. What we know is that if we do need to go fully remote and students need technology, any family that needs to have a device assigned to them while they're home, we have the capacity to do that. But at this point, when we're looking at how to best allocate our resources, we will have iPads available in elementary classrooms should they be needed, but we do not feel that that is the best use of funds to provide every student with an iPad at the elementary level. They will have them in the classrooms, and if we go fully remote, we will be prepared to provide any student that needs a device with one if they request it.
Right, I think that's what's important to it. The second question I had in terms of process was, so the school committee votes on the 10th of the plan.
Correct.
Does anybody else get to vote on the plan? I mean, how does the unions, faculty, staff, do they vote on the plan too, or is the plan enacted by what the school committee votes? I'm just looking at process here.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So the final say on the plan rests with the school committee. That is barring a government or a governor mandate about something that would occur. At this point, we are not aware that that is anticipated to happen. We have been provided with copious amounts of guidance that we are expected to adhere to, but there is local control, and that local control ultimately rests with the school committee. What we are doing is that we know, if you think about those key messages at the beginning, we need to be working together. We need to be working with our unions. We need to be working with our administration. We need to be working with our school committee members. We need to be working with our boards of health. So there was a meeting last week with Hamilton and Wenham boards of health. So as we build this plan, what we are trying to build is something that when it gets to the committee has been vetted from all of the stakeholders. You see surveys out to parents. We will have focus groups next week, and most likely additional surveying. So when it gets to the committee, it will have been well vetted by all of our stakeholders. And so that we're not going to be in a situation when it comes to the committee where there's great debate about, do we have the right plan or not? People will have been brought along throughout the process. So does that answer your question?
Yes, no, it's important to understand that. And that last question is, once again, based on what you know today, what's your best guess on when the school year will start?
Great question. Actually, I was referencing information that came out this afternoon around number of student days. So we are fully anticipating that our school year calendar is going to be pushed back in order to give teachers more time to do planning and preparation, to be prepared for a totally new way of looking and doing school. The exact date has not been set. Initially last week, I was saying to folks, probably not before Labor Day. I suspect that that's going to be pushed out even further. Today, the commissioner announced that he is taking 10 days off of the school year. So that enables us to push back the opening to even a greater extent. The other value in pushing back the opening is that we know that that late August, early September time period is when we can get really hot weather. And some of our classrooms can get up to 90 or 95 degrees. So if you're envisioning working or learning in an environment like that with a mask on, the later that we can push it out so that we hopefully get past the really hot spell is something that we're thinking about. So we have not determined, again, that information came out late this afternoon. But I am hopeful by the time we get to the final plan, the initial plan that will be submitted to the state on Friday, we will have a start date.
Thank you. No, good answer.
And important
Ms.
information for
Myers?
family. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Darcy Dale. I was wondering, what indicators will you rely on to determine whether or not school will need to go remote at some point? Because we don't have a national plan. It's pretty much a matter of time before the numbers start creeping up again. So I was just wondering, would you have any indication of what your benchmarks will be if you do have to go fully remote?
Yeah. So
Hey,
that sometimes is
Sean and Mary Beth, it's David Smith. I'm chairman of the Hamilton Board of Health.
great. Hi, David.
Your spotlight just got stolen, Mary Beth.
Sean, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, David.
Okay, I heard Darcy's question, and that very question was one of those that arose in our initial conversation between the Hamilton and Wenham Boards of Health and Mary Beth on Thursday last week in our get-together conversation, which I thought was terrific. That's one of the three key issues that we agreed to work on in specific task forces following up on our meeting last week. And none of us has any experience in this. None of us has a real solid basis for saying, oh, this is what we're going to do. But we've agreed to work together with Mary Beth on those and several other issues that we know are going to arise as the school year starts back in September. So, Darcy, I want to let you know I'm very pleased with the start we've gotten with Mary Beth on those and some related issues. And today we don't have the answers to those questions, but I'm optimistic that we will as we work together. Okay.
Thank you.
And if I may kind of piggyback on that a little bit, I feel there's some, I don't know if double standard or hypocrisy is the right words, but with some of the DESE and the CDC's recommendations, they're different for schools. Like right now we're meeting on a Zoom and no one's supposed to be within 6 to 10 feet of each other, but yet I think the DESE or the CDC for schools said 3-foot distance was okay, and in person was okay. So, there's that kind of question that you have to work with, and you want kids in the classroom, but you want everybody safe. The problem is there's really no good options and more questions than answers. I don't envy your position at all in this, because no matter what you do, it's going to be the right decision or the wrong decision or a combination of the two, and we're just going to all do our best and hopefully all put our heads together and be able to come through this on top of it. I had a question more about PPE and other things like that. Have you worked with other superintendents or districts in batch buying? I know, everyone's going to be trying to buy these supplies at the same time. Do we have links to state vendors for different types of furniture and PPE, computers and stuff? I know you said we have a one-to-one program, but everyone's going to be trying to buy for that one-to-one program, from, Chromebooks to iPads all at the same time. And there's going to be a breakdown in supply chain. And, that's probably a worry on your mind and on my mind as well, is getting those supplies in a timely manner. And then also testing. Testing now, I think the feds just said that there is delays in testing, and some tests can take up to 2 weeks. So, how do we handle that as a district for staff and students, and time out, time in, different things like that? Lots of questions, I guess, with that, but more so just the batch buying question. Do you have a plan for that, or have you talked to other superintendents?
Sure. And one of the things I'd like to do at this moment is recognize our director of facilities, Thomas Gary, who in my short time here, I can tell you my experience has been that he is exceptional. He has already got all of the supplies that we are going to need in terms of PPE for the first 12 weeks ordered. Looking at, where are those resources, looking at what's being offered in terms of batch buying, but we have those on order and will be prepared. We just took a delivery of something like 600 gallons of hand sanitizer the other day. We have ordered the desks. You're absolutely right that one of the things that we have to be incredibly attentive to right now is delivery dates, because supply chains are breaking down in places. So we were able to get the desks ordered, and we were able to get them ordered in such a way that we anticipate that they will be here for the start of school. We placed the order last week. We're looking at a 2 to 4 week or a 4-week delivery period on that. So we should hit that mark. And the same things in terms of the technology. We looked at the delivery dates. We had to change some of the covers that we used that were not going to be available. But we believe that we will have all of those essential pieces in hand at the start of school. And again, I'd like to recognize the remarkable work of Tom Gary, who is our director of facilities, for his efforts on that part.
That's good. That's good. Getting ahead of it. Other questions from folks?
I do have another question, unless you want to go, Rosie, because I've already.
No, well, Darcy, why don't you go, please?
Okay, I was just going to say, have people considered year-round school, so that during the flu season, that might be the best time for kids to stay home, and then they could have outdoor schools through the spring, summer, and fall? And have they considered anything like that, and being flexible? Even weekends. I don't know why weekends, like a Saturday, they can't take some of their instruction on Saturday, especially if we're going to be having shifts of students coming and going. I'm just wondering, have they thought about using the calendar a little bit differently to maximize the situation?
Yeah, there have been multiple models that we have looked at to try to come up with one that makes the most sense, and we're still debating that right now. One of the challenges we have at schools in terms of utilizing the facilities in the summer is that none of our schools are air conditioned. So you're looking at classrooms that get incredibly hot. As you know, our facilities are on the older end of things, so we also can have some, again, ventilation issues if we were to be in the really hot weather. So that eliminates a lot of potential in terms of looking at a year-round programming. And then in terms of other delivery models that we might think about for schools, that I believe is going to be an ongoing conversation. But currently we are looking to stay within the school week to deliver the primary education. One of the things that we are talking about is that if any of you remember when you were waiting for the snow day call, right? Are we gonna have a snow day? And then that was a day that had to be made up at the end of the year. One of the things that we think may be possible in this model as we build our skills in terms of providing remote education and students become more comfortable with remote education, that we are probably not looking at adding snow days at the end of the year, because if we have a weather event, we will be able to shift learning to the home environment. So that's something we are looking at as an opportunity that exists within this crisis. But that whole question about do we have the right schedule for schools is certainly one that is worthy of exploration.
That's a good answer to that. Has the DESC looked at, I know we've never done in Hamilton, I'll call them blizzard bags is the kind of term, or beyond the classroom kind of stuff other districts have used. And the DESC said they weren't going to do that before the crisis again this year. Have they re-looked at that again? I know you just mentioned it. I was just wondering if they had.
Yeah, I mean, what I would anticipate is that we will put that in as part of our plan. You're right, in the past, DESE has not been particularly flexible around this, but now that there is a remote learning model that is
Right.
honored by the state, we think that will be a viable approach. We won't know for sure until we get feedback from the DESC, but just in terms of thinking about how the calendar may change in this environment, I think that would be an example of what you might see come out of this.
Have they also considered for the older kids, maybe, the sophomores, juniors, and seniors, maybe extending the day into the evening like they were community college students?
Yeah. One of the things that we're hearing and we're trying to balance a little bit is, because there are models that may work better for an elementary age student versus a high school student. But in our community survey, one of the things that we heard from a lot of parents is, I need to be sure all my kids are on the same schedule, because I rely on the older children for childcare. So that is a balance question we're trying to sort out right now. But that's just one of the complicating factors that we're trying to sort through as we try to make a good decision for the community.
Yeah, I know other districts have looked at with the busing issue, having older siblings drive the younger siblings to school and have staggered start time. Or I know some districts in Western Mass have proposed high school being all remote and moving the elementary and middle school kids throughout the high school buildings for the distancing and classroom use. So,
yeah, one of the things that we look at is that while there is a space question, if you wanted to start to spread classes out, that's actually not the primary problem. If you wanted to take, say, a second grade class that may have 22 students in it and socially distance at the 6 foot, you basically need to split that class in half. And the problem isn't so much where's the space that you could put that in, is that now you need 2 teachers.
yeah, right.
Where before you only needed 1.
Right.
And so, we are trying to sort all this out. But if you think about it, we're needing to offer 3 different models with the same resources that we had to deliver 1.
Right.
So that's a complication and a challenge that we have. Keeps me up a little bit at night, but we're working on it. So that's, and intuitively, and I know we've had a lot of community partners that said, hey, I think you might be able to use the space here. But for us, it's really not so much the space as it is the staff to teach classes when you break them up. The other thing there in terms of any community space is that you also run into questions about would there be a nurse on that site? There's a new expense, right? Would there be so those are things that we're unpacking, but oftentimes as we unpack them, we find out that they don't actually become viable.
Makes sense.
So, Ms. Banos, the first thing I want to say is I'm totally amazed that you're just taking off the cuff all our questions, and I just happen to have two small questions at this point. The first is I'm always concerned about expenses, as of course you are as well. And when you talk about a one-to-one program with computers, a lot of kids already have technology in the home, and I'm wondering if there's a software program that might be less expensive where the kids can just say sort of a Zoom type of thing, where the kids can, some of the kids who don't need to be provided a computer from the school can just log on to a program. Has that been part of your conversation at all?
Yeah, in fact, we see a lot of that. So, for example, when I shared at the elementary level, we will not have one-to-one devices.
Mhm.
Families can use family devices and log on to what's called Google Classroom or Zoom or something like that.
Yeah, okay.
At the high school level, it is a BYOD or a lease program, so families are supporting that. And what we did is repurposed a number of different devices that we had across the district. So we were able to, with a much smaller purchase than we would have needed if we bought devices for everybody. We kind of collected devices across the district. We will have one grade level that will use a Google Chromebook, two grade levels that will use iPads. But that is part of our model, is that families will, wherever they can, we know that we are fortunate to be in a community where that's an option for many families. And as we look at tight economic resources, if we can take advantage of that, that seems to be a wise course of action.
Super. And maybe with some publicity, maybe people who might not have kids in the community would be willing to donate sort of lightly used computers or something that might help. I don't know. I'm just thinking.
Rosie, if I can interject just a second. Mary Beth, have you had any talks with the Hamilton Ed Fund or the Hamilton Wenham Ed Fund? They do a lot of scholarships and stuff like that and different donations. I don't know if they've asked or offered support.
Yeah, they have been very gracious in indicating to us they want to help. There was an initial conversation with them about devices. They felt that really wasn't their mission. And kind of in alignment with Rosie's question is that there does seem to be a large number of families that feel like they can manage that expense on their own. And so they want to see us using resources in different areas. I'm comfortable at this point that our students will all have access to devices, either through school supply devices or devices that family are supporting. And I'm feeling like we're hitting the right balance between being responsible and making sure that we've made the purchases that need to happen so we can ensure that, and also taking advantage of our community that is indicating that in many instances that's an expense they can cover.
Beautiful. That's wonderful. And then I just had one other quick question. I have heard, and I can't quote a source, but that there's a consideration for extending the traditional 1K through 12 years by another year because of the concerns that kids will really miss some of the things that they would need to go on to college. Do you know anything about that, or is that just something I heard somewhere?
I think that might be something you've heard somewhere. That isn't on my radar screen right now, but check me by the end of the week, it could change.
Thank you very much.
All right.
You're welcome.
Does anybody else have any questions for Mary Beth?
Just one quick one. Thanks. Those are all good questions, and thanks for your answers. I guess as a community, is there one or two things you can say besides flexibility on our part that that we can do to support the schools?
A couple of things just as a community as a whole. Once we get this plan in place, we're going to quickly need information from families, such as, now that you know the plan, would you want to be remote? Would you want to, because that will cause our plans to shift. I would say at a community level, the more the community can pull together and figure out ways to get students to school not using the bus, that's something that's going to help us out on a variety of different levels. We know there are some families that will absolutely need that service, and we want to be well prepared to provide that for them. But if there are families that have that flexibility, that's a way to help. And then, I'll put a shameless plea in. You see some of the expenses we already know that we have. And if there are funds available from town, stimulus money that you feel would be we would be able to help us with those expenses. I'm putting it out there. We would love your support around that. I know you have a lot to consider around that, but we are sitting with a lot of expenses, and we're looking at getting additional resources in, but anything that you can do that helps us with that, we would certainly appreciate it.
And I think to Jamie's point, if I may add, Mary Beth, when it comes time to do more surveys or outreach or just announcing things, please let Joe know, and we can post it on all of our social media as well as, you guys put on the school committee page, and we can put it on the town page and everything like that, and help get info out or ask questions to the public for survey links and stuff like that if you need it.
Yeah, the turnaround time on that is going to be really important, because we've got some figuring out the staffing and where people are going to be deployed will be very dependent on whether or not families decide to stay remote or if they're moving into that hybrid model, and the same thing with the buses. So I appreciate that offer, and we'll take you up on that one.
Perfect. Rosie, did you have something else? You were starting to say something.
I was just going to add about volunteering, that if it would be welcomed by the school department if people were willing to maybe carpool kids to school, and maybe not necessarily parents, but maybe just people in the community would be able to drive one or two kids to school. I don't know if that's something that you think would be helpful.
Yeah, I think at this point, I think we will start with saying to families, if you can drive, please do. And if you can pick up your neighbor along the way, even better. Then we'll see what our bus capacity is, and we'll troubleshoot from there. But it's nice to know that may be something that a community member would consider doing. So thank you for that.
Right, or even get a Corey check and sign up to be a substitute.
Well,
we're gonna need them most likely. So.
Yeah, there's just every time you think, okay, I get the answer to that one, there's 10 more questions that pop up and say, all right, what about this? What about that? So.
You have really got your work cut out for you, and you have the most Zen attitude. I absolutely love it.
Might just be lack of sleep, right?
Right, she's just punchy.
Welcome.
Any other questions for Mary Beth before we move on?
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mary Beth. We really appreciate you coming to talk to us tonight, and we wish we met under better circumstances, I guess. But we really look forward to working with you and keeping communication open, just in this matter and all budget matters and everything like that in the next year and in years that we're around together.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I am more than happy to attend at any time and answer your questions. Our partnership is going to be critical moving forward.
Right, and we'll touch base again through whomever, Michelle or yourself, about August 10th and joining you then if we can.
That would be great.
Perfect.
All right.
Thank you.
Mary Beth.
Yeah.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
All right. Up next on our agenda, we have approve advance in lieu of borrowing with Joe and Marissa, who's over here. I think Peggy's here.
Peggy's here. Marissa, I'm just going to presage this with saying that as happens a lot this time of year, where our staff has been so busy, and particularly this year where we had town meeting so late, Marissa had pushed off some engagements and appointments, and one of them was till tonight. So Peggy would have joined us anyway, and Peggy is well versed on the subject you're here to discuss. So she's here pinch hitting for Marissa and doing her own duty as the treasurer. So ready for you on this.
Ready for me, Joe?
Sure, go ahead.
You go
So
ahead.
I guess the new name of this is the design and construction of the preservation and construction of the town hall. With the borrowing, with trying to get all our bonds and everything together, the paperwork is just so much slower to get together for the band and stuff. So with this paperwork, all we're doing is actually borrowing from our stabilization. So we have the funds available for Tim as he's moving along until we can sign off on all the bands that you'll be getting shortly in one of your meetings. So I don't know, Joe, if they have the paperwork.
Yeah, here, let me share something up with you.
Yeah,
folks.
where
I
we're
have
sending
all-
this out to the
Yep.
Department,
Yep. This has
Division of
already
Local
been,
Services.
So this is the document, and it would need to be signed by the members of the.
Or
Board of
you can
Selectmen.
give Joe the
Or you
authority
can,
to sign as the
authorize me
town
to sign it
manager.
with a vote, or you can give me the authority to sign it tonight.
Yeah.
The deal with this is, and just to give you a little bit of background, obviously you all recall that at the special town meeting, the town meeting approved additional monies to be spent on the design of the town hall building project. We're at the point where we were going to be doing borrowing for that, but between the pandemic and
Yeah.
everything else, that a lot of the process for that, for those kinds of things, has slowed down. And in addition, because of the pandemic and the financial uncertainty, they've added several hundred pages of questions that the town has to answer before the bonds can be put out. So
We're
So
almost
kind of
there.
around.
right, so we're almost done answering all the paperwork and being able to complete our bond, but we won't have it done in time for the next installment payment to our architects and OPM. This is an instrument that the state allows towns to use, that we know we've got authorization from a town meeting, and we know we have a bond coming. We just haven't been able to execute it in time for our next payments. And so we're basically borrowing from ourselves. According to
There's no
Marissa,
negative impact. There's only just positive impact because we can use the funds.
Right.
Exactly. So
Right.
that's
And-
what we have in our stabilization as of June 30th. Well, actually, just after July 1st, because we moved what was voted at town meeting in there.
Right.
Right.
So we're just using our own money.
And so, and we would repay this as soon as the bond goes out. So Marissa, Marissa did tell me today prior to leaving, for the day that she was going, that she believed we'd actually be able to get this money back in the bond before the end of September. So at most, we're talking about eight weeks worth of borrowing it from our stabilization fund and then putting it right back in there.
Joe, what kind of penalty will we have to pay
None.
if you're taking money out early?
None.
There's no penalty.
There's no penalty. There's no penalty. It's our own, the stabilization fund
money,
is our
yeah.
money.
It
Yeah,
wasn't like an account
okay.
collecting interest or anything like that.
Oh,
Yeah, I mean-
you could possibly lose a little interest, but
Okay, but
nothing substantial.
Okay.
It's what, 400 and some thousand for a month and a half?
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
simple.
So we'll, and as I
And
said,
that's
we'll
even
pay
if the
that-
bill, Joe, that's even if the bill for Tim comes in at the highest point, right?
Right, yeah, right.
This is just a guesstimate on what they've been looking for.
Right.
This is pretty good. We understand the pace of work and what's supposed to be completed by now, and the bill is supposed to be done by that. So we're going to be pretty close to that, but yeah, the bill could come in a little under that. Yes.
Yeah.
Anybody want to make a motion and then we can have any more discussion if we want to?
I will move that we ask, that we give Joe, our town manager, permission to sign these documents to get
Perfect.
the ban.
All right. Anybody second that?
Second.
All right. Any more discussion on it? I mean, it seems to be pretty straightforward with a straightforward thing.
Yeah.
That's right. This is
It's
our
just
workaround or our stopgap to keep things moving along. And it seems, our penalty of maybe $20 in interest will be worth
It's a
the
smart
spend.
move.
Yeah.
It's a smart move.
We just want to make sure we're prepared. We don't want to get caught with the bill coming in
Right.
and not being ready for it.
Right.
And we also want to stay on good terms with our vendors.
Exactly. Yeah.
The OPM and the architect have been doing good work, and it would not make sense in this environment to hold up a payment to them if we don't have to.
No, that makes
Right.
good sense to me. So I'll take a roll call vote if everybody's ready. Yeah. Okay, we'll start with Darcy,
Darcy Dale, aye.
Jamie,
Jamie Knutson, aye.
Rosie,
Rosie Kennedy, aye.
Bill,
William Olson, aye.
and Sean Farrell, aye. Motion passes. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
Peggy, thanks. Your evening's done for the night.
Thank you. See you tomorrow.
And then up
Aye,
next,
thank
we
you.
have a water abatement for 621 Bay Road. This seems that they had a leaky faucet in their stable or something like that. I think the abatement's for about $400 or so. Joe, you can correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, and I'm bringing that one up again here. Again, it's in your packets, but the abatement here is not a really large one. You'd be taking off about $412, and there'd still be a $618. It was this was related to a leaky faucet in the stable well away from the main property. The homeowner didn't realize until he called Tim, wanting to know why his bill was so high. They talked through some things, narrowed it down to the usage. He had someone come out and check the property. They identified the leaky faucet and they had it fixed. And I believe the paperwork included
Yeah, the bills there.
information from the plumber who did the work. So
It was the most thorough application we've seen in the last 3 years. So thank you for that.
I'd say it is for sure. Bill. If anybody wants to make a motion, we can move ahead with it.
I move to approve this water abatement for this individual.
Second,
All right. Any further discussion? No? Okay. A roll call vote then. We'll start with Darcy.
Darcy Dale, aye.
Jamie,
Jamie Knutson, aye.
Bill,
William Olson, aye.
myself, Sean Farrell, aye. Did I forget anybody?
Rosie.
Rosie, sorry, Rosie. I knew I forgot somebody. Don't have my screen on.
Rosie Kennedy, aye.
All right, so abatement passes. All right, next up we have update,
Yeah, go ahead. This is yours, Sean.
update on trash collection program, presentation by DPW Director Tim Olson.
Yeah, we gave Tim the night off here. Tim's wife's birthday was tonight, and he asked if he could provide you with the information for a future discussion. Sean had asked that we be provided kind of updates on our numbers, tonnages for solid waste, recycling, et cetera. That data is compiled for you there in the tables. You'll notice particularly that April and May were high usage months for trash. Those were two of the biggest months we've had in quite a while. And in total tonnages of all types, also those 2 months were the highest. Currently, June was tracking at about average, just slightly over last year, but down from the years previous to that. So that's some data for you to consider. I know Sean wanted to have this conversation, just thinking ahead to the time when you may decide to return to every other week trash collection.
Yeah, so I wanted Joe or Tim or whoever to present some information on it so that I knew that at some point in the near future here, we'll be talking about every other week again. And I want to look at some of the data. And then also I talked to Joe a little bit about when kind of our state of emergency was over or not over, or how things kind of work with that. And in my understanding is we could, if we made a decision tonight, which we won't because it's not really part of our agenda, just looking at the data, we could go back to every other week whenever we make a vote on it. So, or not, I guess, if after we talk about it, we can decide what to do. But so this will be on our agenda, probably upcoming somewhat shortly, and talking about every other week again. And so just take a look at all that data and crunch it, and we'll talk about it again. And I know that, we've kind of had a supportive board here for the every other week, and I'm kind of assuming it probably will still stay that way, but we'll discuss it probably in the next meeting or two in moving back. And then can't forget that in the fall, we'll have the citizens petition for every week, I should say. And we'll see how that goes. All right. And then next up, we had an update on Town Hall Building Committee progress. And Joe, do you want to add anything to that?
Patrick Reffett's been waiting here patiently to help us out. He's pinch hitting for Tim because this was going to be the second matter that Tim was going to talk to us about. But Patrick is here.
Thanks, Patrick.
Thank you all very much. Let me first give Rosie and Darcy a big hearty welcome to the Town Hall Building Committee. Glad you're on it.
Thank you.
We're very excited. Thank you.
It's some real detailed work and happy to have you involved. It's really good to get people, engaged in it. It's been something that hasn't gotten a lot of public interest. And I'm hoping you two can help us build a little bit more interest from community members in it, because this is the town's building.
Absolutely.
As was mentioned, we do have a meeting this Thursday, 1 p.m. It's a Zoom meeting. Please, anybody, feel free to attend and participate. I will mention that the plans are just about at 75% complete, and we'll have a new updated set of plans probably on the town website in the next couple of weeks. Probably have some more cost data pretty soon as well. One of the important things that we've been able to do in the last few months is to get a turnkey estimate that's actually been a reduced number in the square footage pricing. So our previous appropriation and estimate was at 8.2 million, which was back in January of this year. And our latest estimate is 7.7 million. So, I think that we've done some good solid work at cost and value engineering. There are a few things that I do want to place before the board for your consideration and discussion tonight, if you'd like to. First of all, is whether or not we should be planning on submitting for CPC funding at this next supplemental town meeting.
I thought we were.
Yes.
Okay, so we're solid on that, eh?
I think so. I think the consensus with the CPC, and I'm kind of, I don't want to speak for everyone, but I think we're kind of all on the same page. I think we had talked previously, and forgive me if I forget it was during CPC or BOS, that we had talked about kind of keeping momentum going forward. And we knew that we've got kind of a unique situation, even though the pandemic is kind of tanking the economy. It's kind of a good thing because we've got a lot of hungry contractors. And also, if we wait longer, prices will go up as they always do. Yeah. But, in keeping momentum with it, I think that's kind of our plan of attack. And anyone else can say different or add to it if they'd like to.
I'm just glad the pricing has gone down. I think that's great.
Yeah, I think we're all glad about that. If there's going to be a silver lining to pull out of the pandemic and the recession that it hastened, I think Sean just alluded to it a little bit. One of the things that happens generally in a recession is that most building kind of slows down, most construction slows down, except in the government sector. So you see affordable housing projects tick up, and you see government projects or government buildings tick up because their government's the only place that's got money to spend at that point. So generally when that happens, there's more contractors than there are jobs, and so the prices come down a little. It gets a little more competitive. Bill's in that trade. He may be able to tell us if I'm right on that assessment. But that's what I've seen over the last 20 years. Is that kind of peaks and valleys. When the economy's going really good, it's really tough to build government-wise because everything gets more expensive. So.
Next discussion item, as you have heard from Jay and others, we have been talking about a $2 million request for CPA funds. Tim and I have been wondering whether or not we ought to be actually asking for possibly $3 million in a way that has us focusing our CPA funds and concentrating on that money a little bit more than the future use of ordinary town cash. As you know, we're going to have to bond for this project. So the more money that we can utilize and focus from our CPA funds, the better we're going to be able to hold down taxation to our constituents. So I put that out there for board members' discussion.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Patrick. And I think that with CPC, a lot of time, I shouldn't say a lot of times, but oftentimes in the past, a grant has come forward for some entity, and we don't always grant the full amount. And you've been before the board when we've kind of negotiated amounts with different groups, and so kind of ask for the pie in the sky, and hopefully you'll get it. If not, you'll get something in between the two. And I think your point to the CPC money with the state match, that's saving our taxpayers, money for sure. And then plus the bonding is a little bit different with CPC and the municipal bonds, I think. So I think it would be better to ask for more from the CPC. It's just whether they'll get all of it or not.
Is there a limiting factor on how much we may ask from the CPC? Is there a limiting factor anywhere, or could we ask for more than 3?
The only limiting factor is our bond capacity with the CPC.
So in other words, we could ask for more than 3 from the CPC and then bond out the rest? Say, could we ask for 4?
I think that's our bonding capacity is 4.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
our CPC bonding capacity is dead
shy of 4.
top.
The other added complexity to that potentially is whether or not other CPA applicants come forward asking for other funds that might be competing with our town hall ask.
Right. We've been fairly lucky.
The town hall?
What's that, Darcy? Go ahead.
Could we prioritize the town hall as coming before any other private nonprofit or anything like that?
No, what we've been lucky so far with CPC grants that we've never had competing grants. Even though we've had a lot kind of on our list of grants, they haven't all come in at once. So we've been able to pretty much grant all the grants during town meeting. But, we've talked about the CPC meetings that we could potentially, and this may be one of those examples or situations where we have a town hall ask of a $3 million bond or some money in whatever, and then a bond of some sort from the CPC. But maybe the community house comes forward and they want $200,000 for something. And then we would deem both of them eligible projects. And if their finance stuff came in, we would deem them eligible for that. And then it would be up to town meeting to decide which one got which, is be competing at town meeting basically, which we really wouldn't want to do, but it could be possible.
Yeah. In the following years, would we be able to go back to the well for the CPC for?
Only as long as you had money coming in above whatever the annual debt service was. I think one of the going from 2 to 3 million is a reasonable discussion to have, and certainly something the board can and should consider. But if you start getting up over that, you're really going to leave yourself hamstrung at being able to do things in future years.
Yeah.
My concern is the tax rate.
I understand that. No, I get that.
Yeah.
That's all of our concerns. I think that the issue with if we bond a really high amount, if we max out our bonds with CPC, then we're just paying the bonds. We're not doing any other projects. We still have that obligation to do a certain amount of projects with the money. So it would be an interesting kind of a thing to look at for sure.
Have other towns done this?
I'd rather go to the town hall than private nonprofits, I guess.
Right. So that was my question, Sean. Have you looked at other towns and how they've prioritized this? And I absolutely believe our town hall needs this major renovation, and all the preservation and whatever other word was attached to that. But I think that is a fundamental need of our town. It seems like that's such classically what CPC funds are to be used for. And as Darcy points out, it will put less of a strain on our taxes. So although I said earlier I was halfway in jest asking if we could ask for more money, but I think it's a very reasonable thing to do, to put the funding into our town hall. It needs it desperately.
I can't remember, and Patrick, maybe you've got kind of some history. Do you remember what Wenham bonded? Theirs was about 5 million and change. Did they bond with their CPC? Do you remember?
I don't know that off the top of my head, Sean, sorry.
Yeah. And Rosie, as far as other CPCs with their bonding capacity and stuff, it all depends on their income from the tax, the 2% surcharge. But the CPC website, and I don't know, they have a lot of data on the CPC website. They have all the projects that the different towns have done, I think, in the amounts and the votes and stuff like that for different CPC projects on their website. So it might be something to look into. I don't know if it ever pits it, if it says that something failed. I know it does say for when people are adopting the CPC, the percentage it either passed by or failed by, but I don't know as far as individual projects. Like say if we had 2 projects come at town meeting and one of them got voted down, if the CPC records that one not passing. I know they record the ones that did pass, but I don't know if they record the ones that don't pass.
Right. But I also, I agree with Darcy, if there were 2 competing asks, that I think our tax money would be better spent preserving and renovating our town hall for our citizens rather than a nonprofit. And obviously, town meeting would decide on that, which of course is a very fair question. So it will be up to us to present this as a compelling argument. So
right.
It's just an interesting analysis. So it's good to talk about it.
Couple more questions too, if I can. Should we have a supplemental town meeting article and presentation for the larger ask, meaning for the money that would be above and beyond the CPA request? Do you think that we need to have an extensive presentation for that?
I think people are going to know where the money's going, or where
Sure.
it could potentially go, for sure.
And why
I think the goal to this point was to have the town hall building committee present at special town meeting, 90% or finalized drawings with cost estimates and a builder on board, having actually gone out and known the exact number that you were going to have. So I think for you to go to town meeting and only ask for part of it through a CPC would not probably be the best idea. I think we should probably ask for both. And then the second question would still be subject to debt exclusion vote of the voters. And the project only goes forward after the debt exclusion, but you're necessarily going to have both questions approved by town meeting so that you can even know if you can have the ballot question.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's the the plan that we should move forward with. I don't think we want to half sell it. We've already told town meeting it would come back with a presentation and numbers and stuff like that. There was quite a long discussion, if you recall, about which plan and how much it costs and stuff like that. And some real numbers, is what we need. And I think we should be able to have it all by that time.
Patrick, can I ask a quick question? Just to help, kind of further this discussion a little bit. You talk about the current turnkey estimate right now is about $7.7 million. That's inclusive of the money we've been spending up to this point, right? Correct?
That is correct. Thank you.
So if you subtract out that, it's about $1 million.
Yeah.
At this point, that by the time we get to town meeting, we will have spent about $1 million on getting us to this point. Is that correct?
Yeah.
That's correct.
Yeah, I think
we'll be looking at a total ask of around 6.8 to 6.9 or something, 6.6 to 6.9, somewhere in that ballpark. And if the board decides to ask CPC and CPC decides that it's eligible to take $3 million out of there, you're only looking at a debt exclusion of less than $4 million, hopefully.
Right. And I think those are kind of, that Joe's point there is a good point. I think when we're kind of working on our talking points, one is that 7.7 is total money spent, including the money we spent already. And then I think when it comes down to square footage is a big point for people.
Yeah.
When we say the square footage number, a lot of people go, holy cow, that's really high. But it's a different thing between municipalities and private construction. And plus we're talking soup to nuts. relocation cost, furniture cost, everything for that square footage cost. Correct, Patrick? It's
That is
everything in
correct.
that cost.
Yeah. True.
Can I just amend what I said? I don't want to make light of it. I don't want to say only asking for debt exclusion of $4 million. I recognize that's an extremely high amount. I want to correct my words. I don't want to be held to task on that. That I know it's a huge ask. No matter what the number comes out to be, I'm not meaning to make light of that. I know that's a big ask. I'm trying to help you find ways to minimize that ask, but it's still a big request.
Yeah, no, good point. It's still a big ask, but it's less of an ask considering what we've already spent on it. I think the other point I think is a lot of the monies is for the restoration and bringing it up to code. I think the safety concerns, bathrooms, ADA, sprinkler, that's about half of the bill almost, if I'm correct, Patrick. At least
That is correct.
I have a technical question. Have they done any preparation for the COVID-19 workplace?
Yeah, the
we're
staircase.
place now than we were when we first started this. Have they changed or increased any increases due to COVID workplace requirements?
We've had a set of questions that we've posed to both the owner's project manager as well as the architectural team. And one of the main ones to me that we need to make sure is functioning at its fullest capacity is the ventilation system.
Yes, HVAC.
Very, very often large public buildings have very poor ventilation systems. I've asked them to go through that again to make sure that we have a COVID compliant and considerate building, because that's one of the big things that you have to be cognizant of, particularly in an older building, which has lots of walls and curves and bends and dead air spaces. So, that's one of the really important things that we've had them get their teeth into.
Right. And I think another, to Patrick's point there about the HVAC stuff, is that a lot of newer buildings, even though they're newer, probably aren't the best COVID buildings because they're recirculating air for efficiency, depending on the outside temperature.
Right.
If it's a cool day or something, they may be only recirculating 10% of the air. So, there's that factor with filters and whatnot.
So would there be COVID money available for this HVAC system from the feds or the state?
It's a good question, Darcy.
I don't know the answer to that, but it's definitely something we ought to find out.
That's a good question.
Yeah, but I'm thinking in terms of a year or two from now when the building is completed, my analysis is that we'll have a vaccine and that COVID-19 will cease to be the humongous, devastating event that it is right now.
I know, but you also have to think about flu season and other.
Oh, sure.
Just a little bit anecdotally, my wife works in commercial interior design. She designs office interiors for large corporations, and one of the things that they're talking about there is in preparation for the new environment is distancing in workstations, but also more importantly, the type of surfaces that'll be used and the types of materials that'll be used. Those that can be that can be charged to be kind of disinfectant or sanitized electrostatically and things like that. So, and that might come down to some of our choices in furniture and things when we go to outfit the building. And so we should definitely have our architects looking at what the latest technology and best practices say on those types of things.
And Patrick, if you can just make sure looking at everything touchless, touchless faucets, toilets, door handles, things like that, anything that can be touchless, they should review what those options are.
Absolutely.
Even lights that come on when you enter the room, so you don't have to touch a light switch, that kind of stuff.
And it's energy efficient, certainly. Yeah, good. I like that.
Another question too. Let's say that we've gotten through our approval to have the debt exclusion placed on the ballot. When do you think the question ought to be brought up to the residents after that for full funding?
Next one.
Do you think that's say a later November election, December, or spring of 2021?
I want to double check on what the requirements are. I think you need $45, 45 days to advertise for a special election. Pending the approval of the town meeting, we probably want to start planning that additional special election well in advance, so that if it gets approved at special town meeting, you can have the election 45 days after the town meeting.
Yeah.
So
Time it.
depending on what you do today would kind of dictate when that election could be, sometime in December or early January.
Food for thought.
Yeah. Anything else for Patrick? You've asked all the right questions and given all the right answers, I guess, Patrick.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Rare that happens.
Thank you so much.
You bet.
Patrick.
Thanks for pinching it, Patrick.
Take
Good
care.
job.
Take care.
Bye now.
All right, next up, we have, excuse me, an update on proposed cell tower behind Town Hall. 2 weeks ago now, Joe, we had a phone call, was it?
Yep.
And I believe Joe shared all this in the packet. Kind of a flurry of snippets of emails that's been going between us and the FCC and the HDC, et cetera.
It primarily focused on the recent email following the phone call, the FCC's determination.
Yeah, so I guess just for a primer on people that may be listening at home or in the future here, we've had a proposed cell phone tower for getting up on 5 years now behind Town Hall that we had a bylaw change at town meeting, and then we had a RFP approved with a vendor for behind Town Hall in the public safety building. And then since then we've had various litigations, and now we are kind of in, I guess, a negotiation stage a little bit for the finalizing of getting the tower built. So we had a coordinated call with the FCC with Susanna Larson and Jill Springer from the FCC with, and I may not get everybody, but Chris Davis from formerly Varsity Wireless, now Everest, and Ash Johnson, their counsel. And then from EBI, I believe it was Rob McGuire, who's an environmental consultant, Joe, myself, Patrick Reffett, Scott Clements from the Historic District Commission in town, from the MHC, the Mass Historical Council, Brianna Simon and Linda, I forget her last name. And we had a meeting where basically we kind of discussed the whole process, what's gone on so far, and some of the hiccups. And the FCC's follow up with an email indicating they want the Hamilton Historic District to work with the developer on an abbreviated process, which is 30 days at the moment. And that the HDC met on Tuesday to kind of organize itself and discuss who will be representing the HDC. And
that meeting happens tomorrow night, Sean. Sorry.
Oh, tomorrow night. Excuse me. So they're meeting tomorrow night to discuss the kind of next steps with their board on who's kind of going to lead that discussion. And the discussion is mostly going to be with Everest about screening and kind of viewscape. And then I'm pretty optimistic that we'll have an agreement in place and we'll be moving forward before September. And Joe, you can add anything you think that's relevant as well.
You covered it pretty well. The FCC was pretty, and I shared the letter from the FCC, the email from the FCC to the whole board, was pretty specific in what they expect to happen in the next steps with the HHDC and what that's based on. And Scott Clement, who is, for lack of a chairman currently with the HHDC, has been working with Patrick to organize a meeting even prior to the time that they had the call, so that the HHDC could organize itself and elect a new chair. And that one of the topics on the agenda tomorrow night will be, once a new chair is designated, determine who will be representing the HHDC with the discussions with the IP, so that they can get the abbreviated MOA done.
I have some questions. I have questions about the DPW yard that's going to be pushed further back because we're going to have more parking at Town Hall when the addition goes in. How is that going to work? How are we going to maximize the use of our DPW yard if we've got a tower there? How,
I've specifically asked Tim that question. I've been asking Tim that question going all the way back to when I first got hired before the lawsuit was settled and everything else. I wanted to know how much of a hindrance this is going to be. We've always talked about expanding the parking at the back of the parking lot. A couple of reasons for that. One, you need more parking at Town Hall, and two, it helps with the Architectural Access Board for them to recognize that rear entrance as a main entrance for the building. Tim has assured me consistently that there won't be a problem for them. Basically, we're taking the area that is currently where the pumps sit and are going to be pulled out of the ground anyway, because we're no longer going to be using the pumps. We're actually started fueling already over in Wenham, and we're planning on a joint fueling station in the future with Wenham. So we're not really losing much yard, usable yard. And as Tim has pointed out, a great deal of the yard is currently unused and can be used with a little bit better planning. There's a lot of overgrown trees that just haven't been taken down. There's a couple of sheds way in the back that are standing right about where the tower would go. So Tim assures me that this will not be a problem for traffic flow or use of the DPW yard. The fence would just change its pattern to go into the yard a little bit to allow additional parking, and the driveway into the yard will actually, that's one of the things that might be discussed between HHDC. One of the ideas Scott Clement had was that as the driveway comes in off of Bay Road, if you curved it a little bit and added some treescape in different places, you might actually screen the tree a little bit, screen the tower rather, a little better from the roadway by having the road wind a little bit, and that would actually potentially work in our favor with the new parking area. So I've been assured that that's not a concern. I specifically, Darcy, I've been asking it, but specifically after you brought it up at a recent meeting, either 2 or 4 weeks ago, I went back to Tim and I asked him again. I said, "You're sure this isn't an issue?" And he said, "No, it's absolutely not an issue."
and I know that there's discussions going on about the land that we have up on Gordon, on that hill at the Gordon Seminary. So I was wondering, would that be a good place to put it now that they're seriously considering releasing or selling some of their land?
Yes, but in addition to. I think it's in addition to with the coverage maps or the coverage deficiency maps, or I can't think of what they're specifically called, but the one on Gordon, since it's one of the higher points in town, would definitely be good. But we've got kind of a bird in the hand at the moment, and we've got a serious public safety issue and lack of coverage. So, we've got this site approved. It's already negotiated. We've lost, $250,000 or $300,000 in revenue already with the holdup. I think it's work on this and get this taken care of, and then do what we can to work with Gordon and see if we can negotiate that spot or even if it's available. I think that's part of the issue, that in the beginning, it just wasn't an available spot. I think it's more available now, but it's still not available. And I think that's part of the issue. If that makes sense.
If I could up to things, one about the proposed tower here, or the tower that's in the planning stages here. The town has signed a contract. Well before I came along, the town signed contracts. We're legally obligated to work with the builder to help this thing happen. As far as the room on the hill, the land that we own, that we have rights to do things with, is smack in the middle of their main campus area, and underneath it sits where the water tank is currently for the town's water supply. We have talked to Gordon Conwell about wanting to do something with that land, but primarily most of the talk has been around wanting to do something to upgrade and improve the storage tank for our water system that's up there. We mentioned the fact that we could possibly look at siting an additional tower up there as well. Their concerns were really about how it would look in the middle of their campus. I don't know if any of that's changed given their current downsizing their campus, but again, the buildings that they use to teach in and worship in are still the same buildings, and the water tank area is still right in the middle of all that. But we did, as part of the Gordon Conwell task force, I did use some funding to determine if that was a good additional site. The test came back fairly positive. It could be used as an additional site, but that test was never done as an in lieu of or in place of. That was then done as a could it be used additionally to the site that's already under contract with the town.
So I'll just add a little bit of information, just that there've been a lot of people who have had varying views on where the cell tower should be, and I had Verizon, which was just terrible service. And I switched to AT&T because other people in town had said that they had AT&T, that their cell tower is at Browns Hill and they have service all over town. So just as a question, has anybody approached Varsity or Eversource, if that's their name now, and just suggested a change in venue? And should we work toward having a tower on Browns Hill, which would require one tower instead of two, and it would very likely provide service all over town, which has been proven by other cell providers.
I think, I hear your points, and I don't not disagree with them, but I think it's, with the technology, it's a little bit different. Right now, we're very heavy on the technology, with COVID especially. We've got a lot of devices on the networks, and that really bogs down the towers that are existing. And just in general, more people are buying more devices, more people are getting rid of their landlines and going to cell phone only. That it's not really kind of like a one and done situation with cell phone towers. And not saying that we need to blanket the community with them or smaller broadband units, but if we have 2 or 3 towers in town, it's really going to help that piggybacking effect of tower to tower for the broadband and stuff like that in the networks. And plus with the FCC regulations and the FCC, Federal Telecommunications Act, if there's a deficit somewhere and a tower is slated to be placed there, it can be placed there because it's showing a deficit in the coverage.
Well, right, I understand that, and I also understand that Varsity did what they considered a reasonable review of eligible sites. But there have been other people, and I'm not an expert on this, so I'll just recite what people who are more knowledgeable than I have said. But that site behind the town hall is one of the lowest points in town, and you're not going to get the kind of self-service that everybody is hoping for, and that you will be required to have another tower or two someplace else in town. And so I'm just wondering if Varsity and its progeny, Varsity and the town have really sat down and talked about the benefits to having one tower that will be serviceable for all needs that's on Browns Hill. I'm just asking the question.
So I did. May I? I'm
Yeah,
sorry. May I, Sean?
Go for it.
So I did, when I authorized the use of funds to determine if Browns Hill was a good alternate site, or not alternate site, but a good supplemental site, I talked about it with Chris Davis first. And I asked him, what his company's interest would be in switching, just because this had been so contentious down here. One of his points was that their earlier analysis had looked at Browns Hill, given the limited amount of ability that they had to get to it. They didn't think it was as ideal as people thought it would. That if we get a new analysis that shows them different things, they would consider it as an additional site, but not as an alternative. Kind of to their point, I think they've spent a good deal of money and time in the last 5 years trying to get this tower built. They've spent more money and time in litigation and in analysis than they've done with most of their other towers. And they, as Chris pointed out to me, they have a signed contract with us.
Right. Plus,
Use that site.
Right. Money is not everything, but it's a revenue stream for us as well.
Well, it would be on Browns Hill, since we own 2 acres up there, and we could, I am just sort of thinking broadly, maybe.
I think we only own about an acre.
Yeah.
I thought it was 2 acres. I thought I saw the deed, but be that as it may, I understand that that we made a deal with them, but sometimes circumstances change and you can make a better deal with a more advantageous outcome. And that's all I'm looking at. And in terms of Varsity, I will say that they spend a lot of money on litigation because they get a lot of pushback from a lot of towns. It's not just Hamilton by any sense of the word. And we all want good cell service. I am on not one but two computers a lot of times at home here, and I feel that the cell service I have that has that has a receptor or whatever you want to call it up in Browns Hill provides exceptional service.
Yeah, I would worry that, I mean, I wouldn't worry. I would expect that if we broke the contract with Everest and said we wanted at Browns Hill, we would be looking at litigation from Everest.
But we're not talking about breaking the contract where we are, I'm just raising the question, is it possible to change the location? I'm just bringing up the possibility. Is there a way that we could do this, given the circumstances at Gordon Conwell, given what we know about the drawbacks of the site behind Town Hall, and given what we know about the benefits to having it at sited and a very high elevation up at Browns Hill? I'm just asking the questions.
I would probably say no, it's in addition to, not in lieu of, I think is what we're looking at now. We're so far down the road on this. It's we're I mean, we're in negotiations here with them for another month, and then we're going to have a cell tower. It seems you'll be pulling the finish line away from us if we try to do anything else.
Okay, but we should also consider, we already have a cell tower that's been raised over at, was it 464 Asbury? And now we'll have a second one behind Town Hall, and then possibly a third one. That seems like a lot of cell towers.
No,
to
I
me.
mean, the plan was always to have three. That's been the plan from day one, that we need 3 towers to support this community. It's always been the plan.
But
Always.
for instance, AT&T only has one tower, and they give excellent service. So,
No.
so I'm just,
I don't have
both
I don't
sides.
have AT&T, so I have to use Verizon. So
Yeah, I've heard both
So
sides of
this-
the AT&T kind of talks, but I think and you have to look at Everest it's not a provider, it's a site lease, right? So their person that's signed on already with them for this site is Verizon.
they are Verizon. They are the marketers for Verizon.
Well, that's their number one land lease person, but they have I think in the planning board approved for 3 providers on there.
Yeah, 3
They
levels.
probably
Right.
expect Sprint and I'm trying to think of the other one. Maybe if it was AT&T or somebody else would go on.
It'll likely be T-Mobile and AT&T at this point, because Sprint has been absorbed by T-Mobile. So
Right.
they'll be looking to add T-Mobile and AT&T as well.
So just questions.
Thank you, Rosie. Jamie, any questions from you or comments?
No, we've been at this as a town for a long time. People are crying for the service.
Yeah.
And so we need to just do it.
Yeah, I mean, I just see it as a basic public safety issue. I would really, really feel awful if something happens to somebody and they can't get cell phone service, and someone has a heart attack, or a kid gets sick and the babysitter can't get mom and dad, or the hospital or something. That's my biggest worry, and we have a serious.
I have a landline and a cell phone.
Right. But, not everybody has that. And, I have a landline as well and a cell phone, but not everybody operates that way anymore. So.
Well, that's, not to, I think it's unfair to use scare tactics about this, because we all want good cell service and we want to get it in
Right.
the best possible
But this is
location.
our only viable contracted option right now, and it's been our only option for 5 years, and we have to do it, and we have to move forward. It's the right decision for this community and it is a life safety issue, Rosie. 100%.
Well, of course it is. Of course it is.
Right. So it's not a scare tactic. It's basic fact.
No, I think that, to just interrupt for just a second, I think that to Bill's point that we've been in this process for 5 years.
No one else has come with a solution. Yeah.
And the fact that no other land lease or no other spot has come up in 5 years
Right.
is telling to me.
Right.
If we had 3 other land lease or providers saying, hey, we've negotiated with Gordon for Browns Hill, or we've negotiated with this private landowner for this, this conversation would probably be a little bit different.
Yeah.
But we've had 0, and before we've had this RFP out for these 2 sites, we had 0, so. this-
I think I understand and I agree with everything everybody is saying. I just want to make sure that this potential, and I understand it drags things out more, but this potential new development with Gordon Conwell has perhaps come up, and I just wanted to make sure that we're considering that as well.
No, I think we are.
Yeah, Rosie, no, I appreciate your thoughtfulness, because we definitely don't want to destroy our community, but I appreciate those thoughtfulness. But I think my opinion is that this is what we have to do now, and we will be faced with the third tower. We will have to do a third tower. So I think we have lessons learned, and we'll make sure that third tower goes in the right spot and to right. But I think this is the right. I mean, we've done a really good job to mitigate, mediate, compromise. So I think they've done a lot to sort of make the right decisions. And it's, some people aren't going to like it, but I think at the end of the day, like the one that went on Asbury, you can't, with all the, you can't see it from anywhere. I think I've seen it one time I've driven by.
Right.
So
I haven't seen
I know,
it at all.
and there's no guarantee that we're not going to see this one, but I'm more comfortable with it. So, but no, I appreciate your thoughtfulness on it, Rosie. And let's use those lessons learned to make sure that, because there will be a third one that will come up within the next few years, I'm sure.
All right, so stay tuned for negotiations with the HHDC and Everest and getting back to the FCC with that outcome, and we'll keep you posted on it. Next up, we have, and forgive me while I kind of search my computer around here. Special town meeting date and possible warrant articles. So, Joe, I think just before the meeting, I didn't look through them because I was making dinner, but we have some possible warrant articles, and then special town meeting date. Thank you, Joe. We talked about November 7th, but Joe talked to Corinne today, our new town clerk, and there may be, or there is an issue with that November 7th date. And it is, since we have the presidential election just before that, and we have so many absentee ballots, they'll be working on those and trying to prep for a town meeting and deal with all the election stuff, I think would be overwhelming for our town clerk and staff. So we are looking at the following weekend, the 14th of November, for a date. And that's open for discussion tonight. But I think it's probably our best, if not one of our only options. We don't want to get too far into November.
What's our second option? That's
right.
There's not really a better option. Right?
We don't really have a second option, I guess.
Yeah,
I guess our second option would be to do it on the 7th, but I think that's just, it's not, it wouldn't be very nice to anybody. It would be a lot for that department to handle and deal with, and try and doing their best with all the election materials, plus set up a town meeting at the same time. And Joe's worry and my worry is we're farther along into the flu season, and we don't know what's going to be happening with weather and COVID and everything. But I think we're kind of tied to commit to this 14th, because I think if we go farther past that, we're just getting farther into cold weather and flu season and farther along in our calendar. So if anybody wants to kind of comment on that, and then we can talk about warrant articles. Anybody have any comments on the change in date or tentative date?
No, I think it's fine. So I think it makes sense.
Yeah. Bill, your audio is a little crazy right there, but I think it makes the best sense. It's better now. And so Joe is going to touch base with, I think, Eric Tracy, the principal, and see what availability is and stuff like that. And
I did today. Eric Tracy got back to me just before the meeting with an email and said that he doesn't see a problem. We were at that point when I posed the question to him, I was asking about either the 7th or 14th. He said he didn't see a problem with either of those dates. I also posed the question to him of whether it would be better for us to use the gymnasium as opposed to the auditorium. He thought that it would be. He says obviously the room's much bigger. The ability to cause better airflow and social distancing would be greater. He did also, again, offer the cafeteria as an overflow space again as well. But just for you to consider, he doesn't see either of those dates being a problem. They're weekend dates, and it's very unlikely that there will be fall sports being played this year. So there's not likely going to be a lot of demand for the use of those spaces. So if you want to pick one of those dates, we can put it on their calendar and get it in. Mary Beth Banios did note that, she may ask us for the money to pay for the custodians to do the cleaning before and after.
Yeah,
Obviously, that's
I
fair.
think it's typical, yeah. And I'm just looking at a separate screen here of our STM numbers, and it seems our kind of highest number besides, our highest number is about 380 something, and I would say the average is about 200 is kind of my guess without crunching all the numbers. I mean, we've got 321, 126, 121, 362, 123, 336, 197, 381, 384, 94. It seems it's either 350 or just under 200 is about the average. So, it's talking with the Board of Health when we get closer to that about spacing and circulation in the building and stuff. Hopefully they have that addressed by then with their HVAC test and stuff like that.
We're going to have the clickers, Bill?
Yeah.
And Joe, have you talked to Anthony about the clickers yet?
I did. He thinks that if we wanted to go on a joint purchase of up to, he actually agreed with me that 1,000 might be the right number because his high at this annual town meeting was about 450 and ours was 550, and that's 1,000. He said, if we bought them together and they were the same unit, then there wouldn't be anything for us to go, oh, we were expecting 700 this year. Can I borrow 200? We'll send them back to you before your meeting. He said that he would be interested in looking at that option. So the clickers come in at about $36 a unit. We have to clear the procurement process because it's such a high amount, but $36 a unit, let me do them. I'm not going to do this in my head. I'm going to cheat music calculator. 36 times, if our half was 550, we'd be looking at just under $20,000 for our share of the clickers, and he'd be spending a little over 16 on his. And then we'd be able to borrow.
And I'm just looking at the numbers for ATM, and it seems the average is about 300 and change. I think some of the higher ones were surprisingly our last one at 562, but the other one that was big before that was 589 in 2015, and then of course the Peary was 917 in 2013. So I think
the one I wanted the 1,000 for. I was like, oh my God, you had 900 show up in 1 year. I definitely need to have 1,000.
Right, and I think having 1,000 is, we're 8,000 and change as far as population. I think, if we really did have everyone decide to be civic minded, I think we would probably get 900 or so, 1,000 people like the Peary one, if people really showed up for something that was a hot button issue.
Yeah, and it's really nice to have a flexibility of if we needed to borrow from Wenham, they would have it available and vice versa. Yeah, it's great.
And the more
you get a
contested, the more we need is when the meetings usually become longer, right? The more people having a meeting, the longer the meeting gets. That's when it's more important to have enough clickers, right? So
that's a great point, Bill, because we spend an average of about 45 minutes to an hour with a meeting of 300 people. But if we have a big meeting, like we just had, it went quick because people knew of the situation. But I think if we had another 500 or 600 person meeting, more people are there because they want to be heard, right? So more people are going to talk. So any time we can cut out is time well spent or money well spent.
Do you want to entertain a motion, Mr. Chairman, about that date?
I will, if anybody wants to make it.
Sure.
I'll make a motion that we go with November 14th for our special town meeting.
Second.
All right. We'll take a roll call. We'll start with Darcy.
Darcy Dale, aye.
Rosie.
Rosie Kennedy, aye.
Jamie.
He's on mute.
Yeah,
It's an aye.
Bill,
William Olson, aye.
and myself, Sean Farrell, aye. All right, so now we have some possible warrant articles.
I don't think you need a vote tonight. I don't know why I added a TY there. Sorry about that. I don't think you need to vote tonight. This just gives you an idea of some of the things I've asked the department heads to provide other updates. There's a couple in here from the water department and one from the assessing department. There is an additional request here for the town clerk's office. There are some additional costs associated with this year's election and staffing that were not anticipated prior to the new town clerk taking over. As you know, the Secretary of State rather just required that there be 2 weeks of early voting for both the primary and the presidential election this year. And that requires us to have people working the voting booths here in Town Hall during those 2 weeks. So there'll be some costs associated with that, some costs associated with, we were planning to keep Sharon around a little bit to help, but Sharon has taken a position as an interim town clerk in the town of Manchester. So we're stuck looking for somebody else to help train Corinne. So there's a little bit of additional staffing costs that might be tied up in that.
What about the option for the mail-in voting? Is that the same thing? Does that go to, what is that actually, when you do a mail-in vote, where does that go to? Does it go to town hall?
The ballots come back to town hall and then they have to be hand fed into the ballot box by an election worker. But that usually happens on election day. And then this year, part of the reason that the November 7th date was so bad is the presidential election, the ballots can be received up until November 6th, 3 days after the actual voting day. So, they'll have people for, all those days working with the clerk's office, hand feeding in any ballots that come in. Hopefully it'll be down to a trickle by then. I did talk to the clerk about really, advertising that people who want to vote by absentee should do so early and try to have their ballots in, because there are concerns that the U.S. Postal Service may not be able to keep up with the demand. I don't know why, since overall postal usage is down, about 40% from where it was 10 or 15 years ago. But hey, all of a sudden they can't keep up with one big election. So we're going to encourage everybody to vote early. And that's not a political comment. That's just a comment, a wry statement of fact. Postal Service used to deliver millions of parcels a day, and now they're worried about one election. I'm a little surprised, but okay.
Hey, Joe, if I can interrupt for just a second there before you talk about the home rule petition. In your town manager update, is there an update on our current home rule or a special thing for 550 Highland? I know Darcy had asked about it, and I don't know if we have an update for it. We do, kind of, but
I didn't put it in the town manager report, but I can tell you. I think I told you, Sean, and Darcy, after I got off the phone. I had I'm going to forget his name now. The assistant in Senator Tarr's office called me later that same week and said that because it's a home rule petition and it will likely be voted on after the session officially ends, he anticipates the House and Senate coming back for a number of procedural votes. It's a home rule petition. It's considered a procedural vote. He meaning Senator Tarr, has not noticed or heard of any opposition to the home rule petition regarding the property on Highland Ave. So he's not expecting it to be a problem. It's just a matter of getting through all the things that they have been talking about. All the debate has been centered around reforming, the way police searches are done and things, and dealing with coronavirus. So getting them to take the vote to the floor has been an issue only because they've been focused on other things. Senator Tarr does not believe it'll be a problem to get the vote passed before December. I would say, that said, it always helps if the elected officials in town reach out to the senator's office and remind him and ask him to please work to get the vote, to get the home rule petition out of the bills on third reading. But our concern that bills on third reading is typically a place that bills go to, and that sometimes it has trouble getting out of there. The senator's read on this right now is not that there's any opposition to the home rule petition. It's just there because other things are taking priority on the Senate's plate right now. But it always helps for them to hear from us. So if you all want to call, I'm just an appointed guy here in town. He would be much more impressed by hearing from all of you elected folks.
I actually did.
Chairman,
Great.
would it
That's
be
great.
okay if we as a board, sent a letter to Senator Tarr to just kind of light a little fire and
Yeah, I think we had, did we talk about that before? I can't remember. I think we had maybe mentioned that we could
I
write a,
think Joe sent a note, but I think if we are
yeah,
persistent
we could,
and we do it as a group, it might even have more
okay.
firepower.
I agree. We can write a letter and I'll sign it.
Just,
I think it's a
just
great
so
idea.
you know, the resident curator contacted me and I said, I presume that there are a lot of things going on and things were probably delayed by the COVID-19, but just as a courtesy to this resident, I did send a letter to Senator Tarr's office.
That's great.
Asking
Thank you,
if
Rose.
it could be moved along.
Yeah, I'll call Bruce. I called him a little while ago and asked about it. But I'll call him again, and if you want, I can draft a letter and we can send that if that.
I would love
Sounds good.
that.
Yeah, that sounds like a great idea.
Okay.
Thank you.
So Sean, you'll draft the letter and take care of that, Ed?
Yep.
Okay.
Let's see. Back to.
Yeah, back to our list. So we have held over from the last from what was supposed to be on the annual town meeting. We took off because of various reasons. Capital expenditures, which is an expected request of $507,000. I plan to re-engage with the capital committee, but from the department heads, their requests for capital improvements this year to their various departments are unchanged. They're still hoping to be able to get those. In this case, instead of it being a free cash expenditure, it would likely just come from the capital stabilization fund because that's what those funds are for, and we've got that fund to where it's supposed to be. So that would be a good time to take and then put more money back in the annual.
Yeah.
The home rule petition. This has to do with one of the programs you run out of the assessor's office. This is a home rule petition on the acts of 2010, Chapter 91, and town. You may remember we were all a little confused about this. Town council had noticed some irregularity, as had the assessor, and they just want to clean up the language. So I'm hoping to get Tom McEnany refocused on this to redraft the language. If you folks want to keep it on the agenda for September. I had a request for a fund. It would have been, at that time, it would have been a free cash expenditure. We can discuss where the money would come from this time, but still a focus on a master plan for the future of the town. You discussed earlier with the CPC the possibility of 2 town hall building committee requests, one a request from CPC for either $2 or $3 million, and another for a ballot exclusion for debt exclusion for the remainder of the town hall building cost. I put in here other CPC requests in case there are some, and I think I mentioned briefly there's a couple there on water system upgrades and town clerk's office. So the water system upgrades, one of those is a $600,000. This is for phase 4. We're currently doing phase 4 improvements in the water department, money that's already bonded, and the work we're doing, we put the project out with with an ad alternate. So there was a basic project for phase 4 they wanted to complete, and there was some additional work that Tim wanted to get a price on. The winning bidder came back, and the ad alternate price is $600,000 for the remainder of that work. We can put it on and see what town meeting says. We can decide not to do it at this time. I know we'll probably want to look at what our bonding capacity is in the water enterprise fund, because you've borrowed a lot of money over the last couple of years. So we want to have that discussion, and probably have that discussion in conjunction with the next item, which is, you'll recall that you reviewed the plans for water plant pre-treatment system and selected the GAC filtration system. We have money previously approved at the 2019 annual town meeting election, but given the system that the Board of Selectmen chose and voted on, we don't have enough money. So there'd be an additional funding component for that. So those are both from the water department, probably need to be discussed with both Marissa and Tim in the room with us. And that's what I have so far. The planning board at this point has chosen, rather than rushing something through, they've said that they're going to focus their energies on having any zoning changes well thought out and prepared for annual town meeting.
Yeah, I just saw it at the last planning board meeting. Any comments or questions? I mean, I know it's just kind of a brief update, but
When does this have to be written in stone?
So based on the date that you gave me today, I'd say that probably we'll be looking for you to finalize a warrant, probably no later than the last meeting. I'll set a calendar now. We'll do a calendar now and circulate it to you and the FinCom before the next meeting. In order to back up from the November 14th date, the warrant will have to go to the printer at least 2 weeks before that. That means all votes will have to be taken at least.
October.
Well, so you'll want to finalize the warrant probably by the end of August. Potentially the first meeting in September at the latest. I think the more likely. Last year with a meeting in mid-October, you finalized the items for the warrant, not the final language, but you finalized the items for the warrant in the first meeting in August last year. So we're going 2 weeks.
We can still work on language and stuff like that, and placeholders if we need them, but getting it all kind of locked in for the
This
article.
is what we'll be talking about, and have people be able to start having their meetings, have the FinCom be able to have its meetings with different boards and committees to find out what they want to do and how they want to think about it. That gives them, that kind of timeline gives them plenty of time to have their hearings, have their votes, and be ready for their book of recommendations.
Will FinCom be writing their book of did you just say that? Did I?
Yeah, I always assume that they will from now on. Since I've been here, that's been not counting the first STM where I started just 2 weeks or just a month before the town meeting. Ever since then, we've had a book of recommendations from the FinCom. I think they like doing it. I think it's very helpful to the town meeting voters. So I am just operating in the space of assuming they're going to continue.
Okay.
Until they tell me otherwise, I'm going to assume they're going to continue to do it.
All right.
I'm in favor of that too. I just don't know we got enough time to review it last time before it went out. So I would love to read it before it goes out. And I don't think last time we actually saw it.
Yeah, I didn't see it before I got it in the mail pretty much. So I'd like to be able to see it first.
Okay. Well, I mean, you mean just this last time right before the 20th? I think we had a little bit of a different timeline on it because I think we were tracking well. Yeah. If we had gone forward with the town meeting on the originally scheduled day, I think you would have had it in time to read it before it went out. But the world got away from us a little bit the last couple months. Sorry about that.
That's okay. And
it's okay, yeah.
Any other comments on those things? Okay. Then next we have annual town meeting date.
So this is more just an update for you. The annual town meeting date in our bylaws would put it at April 3rd, I believe, and that is Holy Saturday. That's been raised by some other folks already. Could the town consider changing it? It's been raised to us and to the Wenham Board of Selectmen. I had a lot of conversation with Anthony about this. The following Saturday would be April 10th. Anthony is preparing to talk to his board tomorrow night about having their annual town meeting on April 10th. That would make the election the April 15th, which is tax day. That's the only hiccup to this whole thing, depending on how you look at it. If you go beyond April 10th, you're into the beginning and ending weekends of school vacation week. So that might impact attendance. And then you're into May 1st. So I guess your choices are, and I'm not asking you to make the vote now. Like I said, the Wenham Board is just going to take it up in a discussion form tomorrow as well. I think you've indicated a preference to do what they're going to do. So they're going to talk about April 10th and May 1st as their best options. And just want to get feedback from you that I can give Anthony for his call. Thoughts, feedback, whatever.
I mean, either of those dates are okay from my perspective.
So we're allowed to have an election on
tax day.
On tax day, it's allowed, right?
I believe it is. I mean, I know we're not allowed to have an election on a holiday because government services are closed down. But
holiday.
No.
I mean, I don't. It's not a holiday. I can double check that, but I don't think that shouldn't be a problem. I mean, it takes you a few minutes to put your tax return in the mail versus going to the polling place and voting.
Yeah.
And I anticipate we'll still be asking people to vote by mail at that point anyway. So
can we put some mailboxes at the polling place and make it like a 2-for-1?
No, your tax return and put your vote in.
We can certainly talk. You know what?
Maybe free stamps.
Bill,
well, if you go vote, you get a free stamp.
Yeah,
we could certainly ask the post office if they wanted to put a temporary mail collection site at the polling place on election day if we're going to have a town election on that day.
That's a good idea.
It's not a bad idea. The local post office might be willing to staff somebody down there for a couple hours just to
Yeah, it's not a bad idea. Yeah, so let's see what
That's
Wenham says, and we'll revisit the idea.
I don't have any strong feelings one way or the other for the 3rd or the 10th, really.
Either.
Or do I?
All right.
It's getting late.
Yeah. So the next thing up is the second reading of the third-party flag raising policy, and Rosie had sent at least myself some comments on it. And since, to Darcy's point, it is getting a little bit late. Rosie, if you're okay, we could table this one and move it to our next meeting or a meeting even after that, depending on how you feel about it. Right now we have a moratorium on it, so it's not like we're going to be flying any alternative flags for the time being.
Okay, so yes, if I'm perfectly happy to table it and we can talk about it another time.
Yeah, and I think you raised some good points, Rosie. So we'll discuss it next time if everybody's okay with that.
Yes.
Thank you, Sean.
I had only one comment. Should I wait till then? Or should I send it in an email to
Yeah,
Joe?
because we're tabling it.
Yeah, why don't
No,
you
but
send it
do you want to
to-
email them around? I'll send it to Joe.
You can send it to all of us, just nobody replied.
Okay.
And then we had additional special municipal employee designations, and I think Tom from KP Law had done some stuff, but hadn't quite got everything ready. Is that right, Joe?
Yeah, he sent me some stuff late Friday. Honestly, I missed it until this morning, and so I didn't get it to you until this afternoon. I apologize for that. I was on vacation days Thursday and Friday, and I didn't check my mail after 2:00 on Friday, so I didn't really see it till today. I'm sorry about that. There's essentially the biggest thing I can tell you is he's identified for you boards and committees that you could make special municipal employees if you so wish. We did look back at, as Anna had told us, the state had said that we had on 3 different times in the past, and I don't have the dates in front of me right now, had made votes to designate somebody special municipal employees, but our town clerk was not able to find any record of those votes. And they're all way preceding all of us. They're all back quite some time. But with that in mind, Tom didn't necessarily see the harm in re-voting. If the people got voted and we don't have record of it, you could re-vote anybody you want to. So there's 2 documents there. One is the list of committees that you could decide to vote as special municipal employees, and the other one is some correspondence from Tom. So if you want to table that as well and take it up at a future date, I don't think there's anything pressing on it. We took care of the school committee, which was the committee that had the biggest need at that moment. So
I'm okay with that. Is everybody okay with postponing that a little bit? And that's just really housekeeping, so that's not too big of a deal. And then the last thing we had was about, and I don't have the agenda in front of me, but I believe it's about meetings in person versus hybrid and all that kind of stuff, and just maybe an update from Joe if we had one.
yeah, so I know that you spoke at the meeting that I was not here for. I think I was away on vacation in your first organizational meeting when Sean became chair, and you wanted to talk about the possibility of returning to meetings. Currently, according to town council, the way the exemption was created to allow us to meet virtually like this, it didn't create an opportunity to do what we refer to as a hybrid meeting. You can either meet in person or you can meet over Zoom during the duration of the emergency order from the governor. We know that the emergency order from the governor is probably going to carry through at least the end of November. And without being able to really make these meetings truly open to the public, I'm going to recommend that you stay in the virtual forum until there's a change that allows us to do a hybrid meeting. I would love to see a change happen so that in the future, when we're all comfortable getting together in the memorial room again and Bill can be sitting next to Rosie like the old days, we could definitely be having Zoom on and having people participate remotely as well as being there in the room if they want to be there. But until we can offer that option, I'm going to recommend that you stay within the virtual realm for the time being.
Yeah, I'm on the same page. I think until we get a better idea of what we can do with it, I think we got to keep the status quo here.
So my comment is that I really miss getting together in person with people. I really, really miss that human interaction, especially sitting next to Bill. But I also agree it's better for safety.
Yeah, I agree. I do miss the in-person meetings a lot, actually, to tell you the truth. But
We're getting good at this though. This is getting pretty good.
Well, I would like to offer, one thing that some of my my colleagues and counterparts around the state do, and not all of them do it, because sometimes it can be seen as problematic or whatnot. But and we've never done since I've been here, but if you wanted to consider a retreat, we could, a lot in the past, I've heard of town managers taking, or town administrators taking their whole board away for the day to, Rockport or something and having lunch.
Nantucket.
I would say that in this current environment, even just a 2 or 3 hour retreat of a workshop meeting for the Board of Selectmen to be able to get together with me or without me, if you just want to get together on your own, we could plan something where we could maybe go to a local, well, I was going to say the tea house, but the tea house is closed currently. A local brewery, or we could go to a local restaurant. As long as the party doesn't get to be more than 6 people, we could retreat and talk about your goals, your shared visions of things. That would help you get some more of that personal interaction component that I think these committees do need from time to time, without it being a meeting. And we would post it and let everybody, we're going to do this, but there will be no votes taken and no business discussed. It'll just be an opportunity for the board members to create some camaraderie and esprit de corps. So that's up to you. If you want to do that, I'm willing to try to plan that.
I think that's good food for thought. We've done that as a Board of Selectmen. We just haven't done it probably in the last 3 years or so, is my guess. But we've done it a couple of times before that. We've gone to the Boathouse or somewhere like that in Ipswich and had a room there and just had a workshop. But yeah,
That's a great idea.
I second that. It's wonderful.
All right.
May I make a motion?
Yeah, I'll just ask quickly before you make your motion. Does anybody have any new business? And if they don't or they do, they can always email me at any point in time. Anybody want to add any new business before Darcy makes her motion?
A great escape. No.
Go ahead, Darcy. Go ahead and make your motion.
I make a motion that we adjourn for the evening.
I
Second.
that.
All right, and a roll call vote. We'll start with Darcy.
Darcy Dale, aye.
Jamie.
Jamie Knutson, aye.
Rosie.
Rosie Kennedy, aye.
Bill.
William Olson, aye.
And myself, Sean Farrell, aye. Thank you, everyone, for making it the long haul tonight. Appreciate it.
Good meeting. Thank
Thank you.
you.
Good meeting.
Bye-bye.
And we'll see you soon. Take care.